Shalom. So I just found out that you can stream to Twitter from StreamYard because my cousin Nicole was actually streaming with thousands of people listening to her on YouTube, and yeah, so. Hello, Politicas. I don't actually know who you are. Griswold Grim. Hello, Ethan. I don't believe I know you either. Yeah, the countdown music a lot of people seem to like. Shalom, everybody. Okay, if nobody's coming on, I am going to go get a drink. I authorized you to commentary on my live stream earlier. You had a live stream earlier? How much earlier? Let me first find your live stream. What was your name again? Metanoia Marina? You were live streaming while I was live streaming my beautiful thing with Bill. What was I gonna do? I was going to play. Well, first I need to add. Wrong StreamYard. Wrong channel. Things I don't want to deal with right now. There you are. Chrome tab. Griswold. Share. Add to stream. Make myself more important than Griswold Grimm. Okay. This better be more entertaining than your virtual massacre thing, which was not that interesting. If you're just gonna play my countdowns, like why do you play my countdowns?
What's going on here? Should I cut the green wire or the red wire? I think maybe the green. Cut the wire and made the time go faster. How diddly do, neighbor? You've been added to the stream. Welcome. Welcome. Ah, get out of here. Welcome. Get out of here. Welcome. How's it going?
Good. I'm just sitting here trying to rack my brain on what to do with this damn Peter Pan story. It's driving me berserk.
Well, boy, howdy, do I have some convenience for you. You have any settings?
Settings.
Yes.
Such as?
You understand what a setting is. You have a bar for sure, right? Tink's got a place?
Oh, I have a Discord server.
No. What? Okay, in the story, the setting is where the action takes place.
Oh, yes.
Do you have one of those? Anselman, wow, I don't know that I've ever seen you here.
I know.
I think you might lurk. Because I ask you this, sir, because look at this.
Yes.
Do you see this? This is Metanoia Marina. The heart of Hope Harbor.
I like it.
Me too. So the thing is, it's not related to your Peter Pan stuff at all.
Yeah.
The deal is, hey, magic. Well, I guess we should roll savings throws. There's this metaphor for this digital astrological space. Astral, not astral. Well, yes. This astral projection digital space we all hang out in.
Mm-hmm.
The metaphor that works best for me is like, as individuals, we're all little red ants in the floating raft hanging on to each other. But like when it comes to channels and shows and stuff, it's easiest for me to consider like a YouTube channel a ship that travels on the sea of information, and then like the Discord becomes the underbelly of it.
Mm.
And so like when it comes like this whole, what should we name this little corner projects and stuff, like for me it's coalesced into what I'm calling now the Metanoia Marina in the heart of Hope Harbor. And I don't know,
I like it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Let me get the savings throws out of the way for everybody. Let's see, I do this one to make you little and me big. You get to choose. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's the Griswold guy. Oh, I don't know. I guess I need 30 seconds. Here's 30 seconds. Oh, it's like everything I thought to do for the show has vanished. I tell you. Okay, here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here on the show, we do saving throws versus mind control because, like fish that can't see the water, you're swimming in it. And at least I can do is give you a saving throw. If you pick, you get to choose between survival, social, wisdom, or heart to base your saving throw on. I roll the die. If it's over 10, you take half damage from all the mind control.
Do you guys
Wow.
need saving throws?
Ooh, yeah. Survivalists, 7.
Ugh.
Socialists,
There is agency.
A lemming. Lemming is a little.
Somewhere in the back of my brain, I think I've heard that word, but I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I couldn't tell you if it was a little rodent, is a little monkey, kind of like the raccoons.
It looks like a little furry chinchilla.
They wore these blue jumpsuits. They had yellow skin, and I think.
this is why the lemming story touched me, because like one of the first games I really super like stayed up all freaking night playing was Lemmings. And when he's talking about the little blue jumpsuits, that's totally it. They would here, I got that. They would fall out of the sky at the top of the screen, and then there would be like a maze of platforms and stuff, and they'd all just keep walking nonstop. They'd just keep walking, and then you could like grab one and make him turn into a blocker, and then every one that hit him would turn around and go the other way. And then there was ones that you could make him a stair builder, and it was like a puzzle solving game where you had to solve for the string of lemmings and keep so many alive to the end of the map. It was a great game.
You're like making conversions and disciples.
That's pretty hefty.
Oh, wrong button.
A lemming is, to my knowledge, is a bird.
I don't know what to believe or what to not believe. Stage unseen? Wow, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I thought it was pretty believable.
That upsets me.
I went too far, but
In this land of many mysteries, it's a strange fact that the largest legends seem to collect around the smallest creatures. One of these is a mousy little rodent called the lemming.
So I actually had to look this up because I didn't know what exactly was going on. I'm not sure it's as ridiculous as
the
people.
story is one of the persistent tales of the Arctic.
They run into the sea and commit suicide.
White Wilderness is a 1958 nature documentary film produced by Walt Disney Production. It is noted for its propagation of the misconception of.
Okay, let me explain what actually happens. So lemmings do breed like rodents because they are. And because the places in which they live tends to not be as resource rich as other places, like many other mammals, they actually do migrate. And so what they will do is they will disperse. And in that dispersal, what they will also do is even jump into streams and water and other sort things of water in order to disperse. And well, they're not incredibly smart in knowing which places to go ahead and try to swim across and which not to swim across. And so they no, not contractually, but I have to get rid of this idea that people are that easily fooled and there's nothing behind it. Anyway, so like I was saying, they're not incredibly smart in choosing which bodies of water to try to get across, and they will in fact wait, Jacob, you don't believe the mind controlled myth of migration, do you? Oh my god, they have you. Your mind has been exactly. And so not being incredibly smart, they will in fact drown. And to the point where it is possible you will find especially like drowned lemmings washed up to shore, right? And so where this myth, is it really a myth, originated is that while trying to disperse, lemmings will in fact end up jumping into water in order to get places, and they will end up dying. And yeah, and the funny thing about it is we have it as a myth of them following each other, and it's actually a much better myth, as in narrative, to recognize that unmapped territory is dangerous, and trying to get out of mapped territory just by dispersing without looking is precisely what liberals try to do. So they are the actual lemmings who are risking death. Thanks for being wrong before playing the part. We contradict you. It makes us look more right. Okay. The problem is that this isn't just lemmings, but Disney made it out to be unique to them with their propaganda. Lemmings are a very visible example for sure. Don't follow some idiot. Think for yourself. See, again, yeah, okay, so.
Of lemming mass suicide.
Propaganda.
And ends with the lemmings leaping into the Arctic Ocean. The narrator of the film states that the lemmings are likely not committing suicide, but rather are in the course of migrating, and upon encountering a body of water are attempting to cross it. If the body of water the lemmings encounter is too wide, they can suffer exhaustion and drown as a result. Host of the CBC program discovered that the lemming scene was filmed at Bow River near downtown Calgary and not in the Arctic Ocean as implied by the film. McCowan interviewed a lemming expert who claimed that the particular species of lemming shown in the film is not known to migrate or commit mass suicide. And then we were about here. Yeah. This guy, right?
They had yellow skin and I think kind of like this green tufty hair.
I'm very confused about lemmings.
A lemming is, to my knowledge, is a bird.
I don't know what to believe and what to not believe. Stage that scene? Wow, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I thought it was pretty believable.
That upsets me. I don't like that. That's really not a documentary.
They gave us that metaphor, though. They built it for us. It upsets public service, you know. I mean, like,
This, if you look at this guy's, look at this fella's eyes right here. Watch.
it upsets public service, you know.
That is like the face of the woke demon smiling through this poor man.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
It's like this thought is in alignment with the right think. This is a right think thought. I'm having a right think thought, everybody.
I'm being a good boy.
This is a right think thought. It's a public service. Walt Disney, the Lion was a public service. It helped us all. Shit.
I mean, like I said, yeah, there would be a lemming-shaped hole in the public discourse without lemmings. They gave us that metaphor, though. They built it for us. It upsets the public service, you know. I mean,
So that's the lemon story.
That's his left brain trying to take that like chaotic, like he can't handle the truth. So he's like, that's a left brain trying to like rationalize it and be like,
No, I actually think he has a point. Like, yeah, we do use it. So this is, for me, a lot like the boiling frog analogy that everybody uses, which is false. No matter how slowly you boil the frog, they've actually done the studies, and frogs will jump out of the boiling water at the exact same temperature, regardless of how slowly you do it. You could do it very slowly, or you could do it very quickly, and the frog's still going to jump out at the exact same temperature. Well, I don't know if it's exact, but close enough, right? So we need the boiling frog analogy, even though it's false. But I think we need to point out, yeah, this is false, and the frogs will in fact jump no matter how slowly you boil the water.
well, it's actually a public service, actually, them telling us this, and it's actually a good thing that it happened because and like trying to like get it back, get the genie back in the box.
What would we use as an example of mass suicide if we didn't have the lemmings? Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Disney.
So now we go back to the challenge of Gavin. Combine don't think for yourself with the lemmings.
Well,
Those see, no, it's like I think he's highlighting for us the opponent processing that we need in these situations.
well, you kind of are going off of a cliff, to your death, one way or another. You do it thinking, going with that illusion of thinking for yourself, and that takes you off the cliff. Or you can, and I'm finding this all compelling now, of don't think for yourself and kind of let go and fall off the cliff, falling into the arms of the distributed cognition and hoping that picks you up and saves you, right? Like either way, you're kind of jumping off the cliff. Either way, it's a suicidal move. To think is kind of a suicidal move.
To exist is to
Yeah.
To live is to die.
I mean, and you could not contemplate it, but
To live is to die. I actually talk about this, or I try to. Every single day you are spending your life every single day you are spending your life, and that's as much of a martyrdom to whatever you are being a martyr to as anything else. So if you're a martyr to World of Warcraft by spending years of your life and some of the best years of your life, like I did, my God, being a martyr to that, how is that in any way better than being a martyr to like any myth, whatever that supposed myth is? I love Chris, who just restates faith in God. So more don't think for yourself, indeed. Seems like that message is everywhere and long lived. Think. Do in fact think, but just don't think for yourself. We have this dichotomy of think for yourself or don't think. And the fact is, you should think, not just for yourself.
that's a third option.
And certainly not by yourself. Yeah. Don't think by yourself. You can think for yourself, but don't think by yourself.
So what you're saying is Disney did us a service. And without that, there'd be a lemming-shaped hole in the conversation.
Oh, Franco is calling out that the next break I take. Play your
Speak for the
all-time
girl.
smash hit.
I don't understand why that one did so well.
Yeah, right. That's why I said it seemed like it was kind of an experiment.
That song?
No, I mean,
the Lemming.
Disney did.
Yeah, I wonder what their intentions were. They probably just thought that was true.
No, actually, there were people at the top of the cliff that were pushing lemmings off the cliff, so they knew it wasn't true.
That makes me want. I wish I knew a legal historian, right? Because there was a point in human history where they started having to put no animals were harmed in the making of this film.
Right.
Right. And clearly this must have been before that.
I know it probably was really hard now for Walt Disney. He can't sacrifice goats anymore to make his movies.
I know what we'll do. We'll take out the lemmings. But yeah, I'm getting the combination between lemmings and don't think for yourself. And let me just rant on this don't think for yourself bullshit.
You think it's bullshit?
The person that's making a big deal, don't think for yourself, you're an idiot if you don't think for yourself. All that is a propaganda technique, because one way to bait you in is to get you with something obviously everybody should disagree with. Like, look, there's an idiot saying something that's obviously wrong. And then once he has your attention, he does this whole spiel about, like, every time you think, you're actually thinking for yourself, your community, and your nation. So you're never only thinking for yourself unless you're evil. So don't think for yourself. And
well, yeah, he is right. Yes, it is a propaganda. It is a rhetorical technique to take something that people believe is automatically true, invert it, and then show why it's right. And yeah, it's a rhetorical technique. Call it propaganda if you like. This is what I dislike about the word propaganda. It's like, yeah, rhetoric is it's funny. Like, the reason why Gavin thought that we need the Minerval arts is because somehow we got it into our head that people have not studied for thousands of years how to communicate with each other more effectively. Like anything that we as humans do, humans have tried to do better. And so, at least for thousands of years, I mean, whatever. I mean, if you actually believe the world is like, I don't know, more than 7,000 years old for some reason, you're like you probably believe that like we've been studying rhetoric for millions of years.
And that's what's going on with that.
But I think that the idea of thinking for yourself, I think he's right when he says it's pretty much an illusion. Like your thoughts are not your own, and your thoughts are any sophisticated thought is going to be inspired by a million other thoughts and influenced. Like there's not a lot of original thought out there. So I think that's what he's getting at.
No, what he's saying is that it's impossible to think for yourself. It really is in some sense, but
Okay, people have original thoughts. They are creative, and that is a matter of taking what has been bestowed to you and improving upon it. But this idea that like you can somehow be a first principles thinker, this is Brett Weinstein's idiocy, where he thinks I get down to the actual truth, like cogito ergo sum, right? I'm going down to, you're going down as much as you are consciously able to go down to. But cogito ergo sum, all it says is I have thinking processes I don't understand. Effective, yes, but to practice the rhetorical arts in specific pursuit of wisdom might as well be branded Minerval arts. So Minerval arts are rhetorical arts being used precisely the way the Greeks used rhetoric, and basically everybody used dialogue in Talmudic, and like precisely, so they're precisely nothing new. Jacob, everyone knows that the ancients didn't have our knowledge because electricity and modern conveniences are a function of pure knowledge and nothing more. So, yep, there you go. I'm actually trying streaming this to Twitter. You guys should go and see if you can see this on Twitter on my and like and subscribe my Twitter channel, I guess. Is that what you do on Twitter? Like and subscribe? Practiced does not equal used. Not sure what you mean. All human attempts are doomed to failure. Shalom, Flavian. What is your real name? I hate using people's fake names, including Griswold Grimm's supposed name, Griswold Grimm. Be a human being, please.
But what he's saying is, like, to do it successfully, to secure one's own cognition, would be to be accountable. What was it? There's like 3 things, I don't remember which other than accountability. But like, just pay attention. Awareness. This is why thought processing and all that stuff is good. All these conversations are good. That's why I think like having a guy like, Jacob or Mark in the conversation. Even
awareness. What did I say? Where are my slides? My propaganda slides. That last slide was a good one. Secure our distributed cognition through awareness, transparency, and accountability. Yes, I think I did a good job on that one. You use my fake name all the time. Your fake name? I thought Mark is your real name. I promised if you get the ADL to fund it, it'll have the legal one changed to match my inner self. I think I shouldn't have to cut my off to pretend me. Okay, this is your sovereign citizen BS. Sorry. Back to the stream.
Even though they can get a pain in the ass and like they can like make me get frustrated because I'm kind of slower than they are. I think they're good to some degree to help me to examine where I'm standing, what I think really. Because like I've been in the places where I was stuck in my this, and that's not really good for a guy like me. It might be good for some other people. That's fine, but I think that's what he's saying. Yeah, I mean he's clearly done some thinking for the rest of us. Look at we're all talking about it.
Well, I wouldn't have been, but Chris made that rocking tune.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, what I found compelling about it was, yeah. What's the thought? What is the thinking for yourself? Where does that happen? How do you know that's happening? Like you brought up being fed 1984 earlier as a kid, and now it's all around you. We're talking about.
I'm sitting here wondering why nobody's joining, and I forgot to post the link. I posted the link. Join people.
This lemming thing, like the information that you're given, like, and you. No matter how much you think for yourself, unless someone goes to the Arctic and confirms whether the lemming commits suicide or not, you're not you're not thinking for yourself. And what I don't know if this is what Gavin meant, but I think that this process of thinking is a suicide mission either way. So you kind of have to look at it as thinking for yourself, which is clearly a suicidal mission. Like that seems like the worser of the two. Although the second is really bad too, of offering all agency out to basically arbitrary forces, because it's completely, you don't know what.
But you don't do either of those things. It's not one of the two. We might do that after this. Let me finish this. Let me get a drink of water, and then if you want to talk Talmud, we can.
You don't know why you choosing what you choose to be the right thing either. So either way, you're kind of screwed. But
What do you mean you don't know why you choose?
Do you mean why
you do the best you can, but you don't know if it's right.
I want to take a different tack and say, like, you construct yourself out of what you think about what you consume.
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking for yourself, you're doing it to construct yourself. Like you're deciding, like, okay, I believe that. That's probably bullshit. Like you're filtering. Like you're a filter of experience and you're a filter of thoughts. And that's the part of you're participating in the distributed cognition by filtering thoughts to this is what that news comes out. You take the news, filter it through Petcow, filter it through Chad, and filter it through me. We all saw his "don't think for yourself" thing differently. So we think for ourselves. We choose and reject information to construct the selves that function in like a node in the distributed cognition network. And check out this thing about AI I saw today.
I love that.
I think you're right when you're saying identity has a lot to do with it in the construction of the self. I think you hit something there. I think that's the core of what you're doing and what you're going to choose, the things that are going to matter and not matter, and who you choose to listen to and what you choose to expose yourself to. All of that comes down to how you'd like to view yourself.
Joey was propagandized into speaking for trees. Starting to think Dr. Seuss might not have been a real doctor. Lemmings are now being served at Cinderella's oil. Oh, I don't know how to feel about that, Lynn.
Could each other decide what's interesting?
This
In
part.
Transformer simultaneously, image or something like that. And you want to train this computer, so you want to set its weights. And I think there's a number of design criteria that sort of overlap in the Transformer simultaneously that made it very successful. And I think the authors were kind of deliberately trying to make this really powerful architecture. And so basically, it's very powerful in the forward pass because it's able to express very general computation as sort of something that looks like message passing. You have nodes and they all store vectors, and these nodes get to basically look at each other and it's each other's vectors, and they get to communicate. And basically, nodes get to broadcast, hey, I'm looking for certain things, and then other nodes get to broadcast, hey, these are the things I have. Those are the keys and the values.
So it's not just attention.
Yeah, exactly. Transformer is much more than just the attention component. It's got many pieces architectural that went into it. The residual connection, the way it's arranged. There's a multi-layer perceptron in there, the way it's stacked, and so on. But basically, there's a message passing scheme where nodes get to look at each other, decide what's interesting, and then update each other. And so I think when you get to the details of it, I think it's a very expressive function. So it can express lots of different types of algorithms in forward pass. Not only that, but the way it's designed with the residual connections, layer normalizations, the softmax attention, and everything, it's also optimizable. This is a really big deal because there's lots of computers that are powerful that you can't optimize, or they're not easy to optimize using the techniques that we have, which is backpropagation and gradient descent. These are first order methods, very simple optimizers, really. And so you also need it to be optimizable. And then lastly, you want it to run efficiently on our hardware. Our hardware is a massive throughput machine like GPUs. They prefer lots of parallelism. So you don't want to do lots of sequential operations. You want to do a lot of operations serially. And the Transformer is designed with that in mind as well. And so,
well, the reason this sticks out is not only because like the Lawnmower Man and the AI stuff that we're talking about, but the way he described the node part, I'm hoping it played, was Indra's web. That's entirely Indra's web. And what I'm thinking right now is that these guys are looking at how to build AI by looking at how our minds work. And if we watch what they're doing and be those nodes, like we fractal it up out here and we model general distributed cognition.
Okay, so this is the funny part. It's like we had a bunch of idiots during the Enlightenment make up, well, I shouldn't say idiots. There were a lot of people who tried to understand things that human beings have been trying to do for a long time. And they made all the mistakes of modernism. And then postmodernism came along and showed a lot of the mistakes of the modernism. And we ended up in a nihilistic funk. But God, in his infinite wisdom, helped us create computers. And now we can use computers to model complex enough things that it's obvious to us how stupid the moderns were in their thinking of previously. And now we can move past both modernism and postmodernism back towards God, where he was in the very beginning at Mount Sinai. Okay. Oh, Carpathy, how we have fallen. He likely does understand things and is oversimplifying. But the problem there is scaling. Optimization for attention has no overlap with normal optimization. I'm not sure what to think of that. The problem with AI is not that it is not modeling the human brain at all. Just look at 4E CogSci, 4 types of memory and knowledge. That isn't an AI at all. Well, I think that's how. I mean, yeah, we're understanding that things have to be a lot more complicated than modernists, materialists ever imagined.
Because okay, so here's
Humans and AI are in a space race.
no,
That's exactly correct. I mean, like when I was thinking about this, I thought a lot of this thought came to me a lot. Like that's what, to me, that's what seems like the Beholder Project is. That's what I'm doing is what I don't think an AI can exactly do what I do, or can watch like just 10 random videos and then find the most salient thread and then like throw something together. Like so kind of that's what we're doing. That's what the Loom is, right? It's like, oh, these are like there's something in here we can't exactly say exactly what it is that's relatable to the next clip, which is relatable to the next clip, which is relatable to something I saw back in 1992. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, is there anything more important than that I actually need to play from this video, or you want to summarize?
No,
it?
you should go and watch the rest of it yourself, and so should the rest of your audience to up my view count. And yes, there's lots of more nuggets of wisdom in there. It's fabulous.
Like what?
Like
There's
what?
a kitty behind you.
It what?
There's a kitty behind you.
Oh, that's Sylvia. She gave birth to the cast of the OA earlier this year.
I need 10 hours of kitty video of your video so I can play it next time people are talking and there's nothing like, so we can all sit there and watch kitties.
That was Joey did that, pulled those streams up, right?
No, that was me.
Oh, wow. That was Joey. Huh. Anyway. Welcome. What's the rest good? I think I was about to tell Chad where he was wrong, and that was really entertaining for everyone.
Tell Chad where he was wrong about what?
Whatever he was just saying.
Okay. So how have you been?
On the ups.
Ups is good.
Yeah. I mean, I had a featured commentary by Pastor Paul Vanderklay put next to Peterson, where he kept having to say, I'm not trying to piss on these experts here, but these fellas. And that was nice. That felt
Is
good.
this a video I saw, or is this something new? Because he's
Did
been.
you the Grime Line one?
Oh, yeah.
Like he there's a whole segment of his audience that won't tune in unless it says Peterson in the title. And like he found what was in the conversation worthwhile enough to put it next to something that they would want to see, so they would see it too. And that was like, wow. It touched me. It touched me. So like next season, I should be all bitter and sniping and have 20,000 subs.
Oh yeah, you could definitely do that. It's funny. I was somebody sent me a this video by Cosmic Skeptic and something else skeptic and whatever skeptic, genetically modified skeptic.
I tell you, man, like the people smart, the name camping, the genius of the name camping is. I think honestly, I don't know how to rearrange the entire system to do it, but like if there's a really cool name, people should be able to like duel for it.
Well, we should just be capitalists and let people bid for it with money. And I do recommend Thomas Sowell's book, Basic Economics. But so these two skeptics were sitting around as older, wiser men talking about how their 20-year-old or 18-year-old or I don't know, something stupid year-old selves had picked up Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, and they had believed that the biologist understood theology, which, you know, they would obviously, if Bishop Barron wrote a book on biology, they wouldn't read it. But somehow Dawkins talking about the God Delusion is less silly, which is backwards.
I have no familiarity with the contents of that book.
The God Delusion?
Yes, I'm confessing that.
It's Dawkins making a lot of stupid basic errors in first grade theology. I
know, but I don't know what the theme is. I mean, other than what
the theme is
typical
that
atheist?
that the idea of God is a mind virus that has infected humanity and must be purged from us.
Well, that's going well.
Well, no, it's not. And like, so these two skeptics are sitting there talking about, yeah, we were kind of silly. And it's like, yes, you were kind of silly. Now, the question is, who made teenage silly people the people we should actually be paying attention to, as opposed to, well, part of the problem is
they're representative of the target demographic.
Yeah, and there was somebody like Dawkins. It's funny, he still hasn't realized that he made his own bed, and that's why life is not going well for him. But, yeah,
Jordan Peterson talked to Dawkins, and in it he detailed his mushroom trip, and that is a clip the algorithm has not ever recommended to me. Oh, go ahead.
Are you pro mushrooms or anti mushrooms?
I think the person should be very, very sure that communing with other intelligence is what they want to do.
So you believe that mushrooms
I don't think it's a recreational thing. I don't think it's a party experience. I think it's some like it could it's like a it's not the same as heroin where like if you do it once you might be addicted probably, but it's like if you do it once you might not be the same on the other side, and it might be in a way that's worse rather than better. So approach it with that level of respect and you'll be safer than otherwise.
hello, Red Track. Yeah, that's what I was saying. And now, can you entertain people while I go to take a smoke break?
Mhm. Yes, I can. Can you give me superpowers so I can highlight comments? Because I can't right now.
You had superpowers.
I
and then
know, and
you
I
did
rage
your
quit, so
superpower.
there would be rival network dramas, but
I
Mhm.
I don't know how to give you superpowers while you are in the studio.
Oh well, then at least take marks off, so I don't have to look at it the whole time. I mean,
Okay, and you won't have to look at.
hey, it says I can present. Let's see if I can, because that would be cool. Here, genetically modified skeptic. Since we're going to be covering his other work, apparently, why don't we show some of that together? It's so loud. Sorry. Oh no, I can't put it on the stream. I can share it, but I can't put it on for you. So that's awkward. Hi there, Red Trek. I'm Grimgriz. I have my own channel that's much better than this one, but it's a lot to carry your own thing because it goes in your reputation in ways that an appearance on some other Yahoo's podcast just doesn't, and so here I am holding Jacob's audience. I should be speaking. Did you see the just chatting I was in with him last time where he I'm totally cool if it's aliens, bro. And I have a patron. Thanks, Pastor Paul. I'm glad you had if you came in, I don't think I could add you to the screen. So it'd be awkward. We're apparently going into something of this genetically modified skeptic, which is adorable. Fag, hello. Nakama. A reputation. What a pesky thing. That's I don't know. I think you can definitely destroy whatever one you had and then return yourself to the level of free speech I have. It's good to see you. The stream me, Chad, and Petcow had was better. We covered it earlier. I was hoping you'd see it then. You should do a defense against the dark arts, Mark. I think it's good. I think we can do a what you call it? Actually, I can't show you that either. There's this thing. There's this it's in the it's called Four Corner something. But I think it's a game we could play. It's like a video on how to, when you're a writer, on how to make compelling characters, right? And they're like, okay, so you take a proposition and then you put one dude, the main character is the best turnout. He's advocating from the view that taking the proposition positively has the best outcome, and he embodies that. And then like you have the antagonist who embodies like if you take the proposition the other way and run it the most negative, that's how it plays out. And then you have the supporting cast. But I think it's a game of like we could do that with a conversation with four people where each person took that position of the premise, the claim, or whatever. Don't be fooled. Oh, thank you. I can't say it again. Now I'll mess it up. Oh, you're having an intimacy crisis, Mark. I understand. I empathize. I like the way people interpret intimacy as Love Guru was when I decided movies weren't for me anymore. Actually, Mariska Hargitay. Good. I'm glad to have you. The last week of stuff has all been hot sauce. The next week, I don't know. That's how it plays out. Wow. There. Thank you, sir.
How exactly does one start a cult? Well, first, you have to be a criminal mastermind or a supremely charismatic leader who has mastered the ability to manipulate anyone you meet, right? No, not at all. In fact, by the end of this video, I hope it'll be clear that normal people can and do start and maintain cults. It isn't leadership, it isn't charisma, and it isn't any supernatural force that makes for a successful cult. It's a self-sustaining, self-propagating culture and dogma that does it. If you want to know how to start a cult, you need to know how to begin building a structure like that.
I just happened to search for how to start a cult earlier. And apparently this guy we're about to talk about is that's the person YouTube recommends to me for this sort of thing. That is a hell of a thumbnail, though. I have to give him that.
The person who can teach you about starting cults is James Tabor.
I learned it from YouTube or personal referrals. Do you know James Tabor? Does he have a YouTube?
Not personally. He has a YouTube channel.
All right, I'll watch his stuff. TABOR?
Most of his stuff is about Jesus.
Oh. Well.
He's a historian, but he's also the world's expert, one of the world's foremost experts on cults.
I want to clarify for the record, I had searched how to lead your cult, not how to start a cult. And that's cool because I think there can be positive instantiations of pyramid schemes, and that cults are basically just the first stage of a culture.
If you say so.
I do.
Yeah, I think you would like James Tabor. He's not skeptical enough, though.
Oh, I don't judge. See, my whole premise is like even the broken clock is right twice a day, so you can listen to everybody who's usually wrong. And
he's a pretty smart guy. He's done a lot of excavation in Israel.
Does he know about that guy who said he found the blood? The one who dug underneath and said it dripped down onto the thing?
I am sure he's heard of it, but James Tabor is the only one who's actually found DNA that might be related to Jesus.
Is Nick the one who co-hosted one of the Q&As? Is that for Cult Nick or is that somebody else?
Oh, maybe. I don't know Nick. Oh, for Cult Nick. Yeah, he's the guy who makes the knives.
No, don't know anybody from knife making. But there was a Nick who did a PVK Q&A last year. Real soft, real articulate and skillful.
That might have been for Cult Nick.
Yeah. It is confirmed. See, I think we need trading cards for people. Like, wouldn't it be cool if there was some Google Drive where our rabid fans had made trading cards of people who have appeared, who have channels and have appeared on channels? Like collector's cards. Like, wow. Not wow. Not like wow. The other one, Wizards of the Coast.
My Magic the Gathering, what I spent a very large section of my life doing.
Precisely. Yeah. Except instead of spells and whatnots, it's like concepts and talk show hosts.
And so I think the important thing is actually colonizing each other's minds.
Okay, but
I don't
that's
care
the
if
important
Paul
thing.
Vanderklay. I don't care if Paul Vanderklay plays one of. Well, I do care, but I only care secondarily if Paul Vanderklay plays one of my videos on his channel. I care a lot more if Paul Vanderklay understands and feels that the things that I feel are important are important.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk to Paul Vanderklay and or when I make a video or anything, right? It's not the ownership of it that I really care about. It's the colonizing of the environment that I care about.
So long as you get your idea in there and the seed is planted, you don't care about any of the other ramifications.
Okay, I have to say, like, so evangelizing and proselytizing is against my religion. So for me, the reason why I speak Logos is because I believe it is true, and I have faith that in so doing, I am improving the world.
Okay, but like you're describing to me a mimetic complex that has infested your mind with that has the primacy of reproduction. And you're now having to like throw justifications because of the conflict with the prohibition against proselytizing, that it's not that you're trying to seed the idea, right?
No.
How is that wrong?
I believe in secured cognition. I believe in distributed cognition, and I believe in securing our distributed cognition. And I believe that engaging with our distributed cognition is necessary, and not only necessary, I believe it is in fact Talmud.
But when you say Talmud, you just mean Israel, because you just mean wrestling with God.
That's an interesting idea. Is Talmud Israel? By Talmud, I mean a hermeneutic of dialogue.
Seeing what you can get away with without breaking God's laws.
Yeah, that's not what the Talmud is.
Is that part of what the Talmud is? I heard it was arguments about that. So
it's arguments about the meaning of the word of God and applying it in our lives. Jesus, so what was most surprising to me was seeing how steeped Jesus was in the Talmud when I looked in the Gospels, because I never imagined that Jesus knew Talmud.
I have no idea what I got distracted by the accuser in your chat there.
This one or this one?
The one above that. This.
All things are not mimetic. Dawkins didn't prove memes, as Brett Weinstein actually pointed out. You misspelled Brett, by the way. To him, it's a thought from a book with zero backing in science. Yeah, that discussion between Brett and Dawkins in Chicago, which Sam actually attended live, may be the most important intellectual discussion in at least 100 years of human history. I'm into this secured cognition. Increased diversity is ironically going to make us all the same.
Force diversity, Pokemon
no, that's
diversity.
Not diversity. There is a difference between homogeneity and and interconnectedness. So some people have been using this term globo homo. You know that term? Grim.
I would guess it must mean that they're trying to make the whole world gay.
See, that's how it's used mimetically. That's the propaganda behind it. But it's actually talking about global homogeneity, right? So there is,
Yeah, and if you do that, it's gay.
well, yeah, okay, but you don't need homogenization in order to have globalization.
But if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need.
He
Phoebus
knew
is in.
Talmud very well.
Yeah, he's like the embodiment of the omniscient. That's fine.
That is a heresy in Christianity.
I'm not in Christianity.
Obviously, yes. The idea that incarnate Jesus was omniscient is considered heretical as a Christian.
But
TLC
how did they know what was in the cup then? How did he know how severe the cup he wanted taken away from him was if he didn't have at least prescience?
So the idea is that incarnate Jesus knew a lot of things, but he was not omniscient. So there's a difference between, because there were plenty of things he didn't know. So how could you say he's God? And
What do you mean? Where in the Bible is there any indication that there was anything Jesus did not know?
all the places where Jesus says, I don't know, which there's more than a few of.
Interesting. I'll have to take a look at those pieces. I mean, I stop at the if your faith was as that of the mustard seed. I'm like, gosh.
Okay. It was edited. The whole sequence was deleted from the last book I looked at. I have no clue what you're talking about. What is he talking about? My point was unsecured cognition basically means you're absorbing the culture and true diversity fades. No. Okay, so that's not what I mean by secured distributed cognition. I mean the protocols should be secured against being hacked. Intellectual diversity, I believe, is inevitable because that's how God created us. Exactly. Equality is a current goal, which is also a bad idea in anti-evolutionary theory. Yeah. Nechama says, so essentially the Talmud is distributed cognition. That makes sense from my experience of the Talmud. Nechama, women aren't supposed to study Talmud. That's only in the really, really like ultra sects, which I don't agree with.
All right, we got to do something because I'm either gonna have to leave or sing soon.
Sing for us, Grim.
I said your love is lifting me higher than I've ever been. It's hard to open your diaphragm. First, you have to remember to open your diaphragm, and then you have to like relax into it. And it's really hard with Jacob Federecci staring at you.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
You have a piercing glare, whereas everybody else would just join in. I was met with a piercing glare.
I see.
What statement was cleaned up, Mark? What statement was cleaned off of YouTube? We will spread it in your honor.
Are you talking about Brett Weinstein's? I mean, it's on YouTube. Like that.
Yes, what he's claiming is that the one on YouTube has been edited to remove some statement, but I'm not sure which statement.
I don't think it was edited. I think it was badly recorded.
Maybe that part where Brett pointed out that he didn't prove memes is what he's meaning.
Oh, really? Because okay, I mean Brett did enough of a good job of making Dawkins rethink. Mark's here almost. What do you mean by cognition hacked? I guess I should have watched the lecture.
He means cognition hacked means somebody hijacked your amygdala and then inserted their propaganda, colonized your mind.
No, that's not what I mean at all. I mean using illegitimate means to affect things as opposed to legitimate ones.
Illegitimate. What makes a means legitimate or illegitimate, sir?
That is a difficult question, sir.
Well, let's answer it together because we have the three most powerful minds in this little corner.
We definitely do not have that.
Here on my top right, on your left, I don't know. We have the problem is, and here on my top other hand, we have the problem is. So the only thing left for me to do is to solve all of these problems. Let's go, boys. What do you got? Let's do this. Problem solving mode engaged. Gavin I might need to call Gavin and bring him in for backup, but I think I got this. Give me a problem, I'll solve it.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show where you can you have a lifeline, you can call in a friend or whatever.
Yeah. I'll take that. That's one lifeline. I can pull the chat. There's another lifeline. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
all
what
the
my third one
audience.
could be.
Yeah, I don't know how that.
No, that is actually a very good question that I don't have an answer to. What is a legitimate means of
How do you determine
manipulating
the
the security?
legitimacy of?
What do you mean legitimate means? How are you?
Right. That's
Okay.
that's
We
what we're
have-
framing
okay.
the question.
Grim, allow me to actually say
All right, finish.
state the thing. Okay. So we have secured cognition. No, we have distributed cognition. And we have human agency in manipulating our distributed cognition.
Mhm.
And some means of manipulating our distributed cognition is more legitimate, at least to some people, than others. For example, it's fine if I buy advertising that's transparent, but it's not fine if I put false flag advertising. Like if I were to, for example, put something in Beyond, what is the name of that thing that just Beyond Salaga or whatever that you guys know?
Why
what
don't
I'm
you use
talking
an
about?
example anyone is familiar with?
So, okay, let's talk about cigarettes and women smoking.
Okay.
So, Bernays
And his
figured out,
Liberty torches.
yes, he figured out that he could sell more cigarettes by appealing to women's sexual fascination with cigarettes than what used to be just normal advertising of cigarettes.
Or, in other words, he found out if he made cigarettes look sexy to the stupid lady folk, they'd think it was sexy instead of gross. So he put pretty girls on the parade smoking, and they put pictures of that in all sorts of newspapers. And the next thing you know, cigarette sales have expanded into a new gender.
So, what exactly is wrong with that?
That the cigarettes were harmful to the health, that he's doing business with people that are profiting from harming his fellow man.
First of all, I have to ask you, do you think he knew that in the 1920s?
I'm not playing ADL Bernays versus Grimm. What is the problem? The problem we're trying to establish here, if I'll return us back to the topic, is what is legitimacy and illegitimacy in terms of means used in
in affecting our distributed cognition. And
Thank
you're telling me that what's wrong with what he did is that tobacco smoking is harmful. Well, if he didn't know that, then how could that be the determining factor of whether or not what he did is legitimate?
I never claimed what he did was illegitimate or that he used illegitimate means. It's like you've heard of supernormal stimuli.
Yes.
It's where like scientists figured out that the bird likes to sit on the red eggs, and so they make a really red egg, really red fake egg,
Yeah.
and then all the real eggs die because the scientists put the fake one there. And it's basically he figured out like a way to use supernormal stimuli effects, and they're dangerous because it can conclude messages that are harmful.
Right. But they can also include messages that are helpful.
Well, it's like a wrench or a hammer.
Exactly.
Right.
So
and that's everywhere, Jacob. So I was watching the show The Peripheral, which is based on a William Gibson novel, I guess, that came out in 2014. And the show is on Amazon Prime. And they used the hammer example today in the episode they released today, and I was just laughing my tail off. Right? They used the hammer can be used for this, or it can be used to murder people. I mean, really? We resolved it thousands of years ago, and we're still stuck on this whole thing.
See,
Okay.
Even Mark Lefebvre can enjoy synchronicities.
Okay, but it seems to me that good distributed cognition does, in fact, remove certain ways people affect our distributed cognition, including lying, for example.
Well, except that the problem with lying is that it's very hard to define, because technically you have to lie to children. You have no choice. You can't tell them the whole truth. And this is like when people go, I've been lied to. Yeah, but was it for your good? Because if it was for your good, I really don't care that you were lied to. Because children are lied to all the time. It's not that easy. Like you can't just divide up the world that way and come up with solutions on that basis.
You can't treat people. You can't treat adults like children and expect them not to be angry about it.
Oh no, I don't care if they're I don't care if they're angry. First of all, right?
Nobody
because
cares
if they're doing
what
the
you care
good,
about.
it doesn't matter. But also, you can treat adults like children when they're acting like children, and in fact, when they are children, and they won't get angry. But I don't like their anger does not affect me whatsoever. People are allowed to be angry. It's
Nothing affects you, sir. But we do have a troll in the chat. Laura Freeman is a free burn from Laura on Jacob.
Friend of mine.
With just got here. Have you guys watched Century of the Self? She's
Why is
trolling
that
you, Jacob.
trolling? No, it's
what?
relevant.
Tell us about Century of the Self, Jacob.
It's propaganda be used in order to prevent people from actually learning what Bernays taught.
Ah, there we go. Perfect example, right? Because we're talking about the technologies of the means and the use of the means and what is a legitimate and illegitimate use. And your claim here now is that they used the means illegitimately to obfuscate important information, and that it was used to obfuscate is what makes the use illegitimate.
No. His illegitimacy claim is that isn't what Bernays said, and therefore it's illegitimate, which is different from the obfuscation.
It's not an actual. It pretends to be a documentary, and instead of being a documentary, it is something that is meant to make you think. Make you think Edward Bernays was this horrible person that you should never read his books. Instead of informing you about Bernays, it's actually there to stop you from learning more about Bernays.
Okay, hold
The
on, hold on.
intent is the opposite of what it pretends to do.
I'm
In
having
other words,
a
it's
false
a lie.
memory. I'm having a false memory. I think I tuned in to something done on this stream earlier, and you, I think it was, were saying like the stupid people shouldn't know about the Talmud. You were using
That was not what I was saying at all. And in fact, what I was saying to Bill was it's very, very hard for me to explain to people why I think Gentiles, in fact, should not study Talmud, because it's not like I'm saying it's not like I'm saying there's anything in there that you shouldn't know, or that I'm trying to hide anything from you, or anything like that.
okay,
It's
what?
because I believe it is not useful and maybe spiritually harmful. But if you want to do it, go ahead.
All right, stop.
Okay.
Century of the Self. Those people have exactly the same beliefs about Bernays' material that you do about the Talmud in your example, and they're using Mark's "it's okay to lie to people."
No,
To
but Jacob's not doing that.
no.
That's
The people who
that's
made the
difference.
documentary, the people who made
Yeah,
the
no, I
documentary are
understand.
using your.
Right, but you're drawing a false equivalency. What Jacob is saying is, Jacob, as himself, representing only himself, not putting out any documentaries or anything like that, isn't telling a bunch of people, well, you shouldn't read the Talmud because the Talmud says this, that, or the other thing, and giving a false impression of what the Talmud is doing. Okay, but that's what they're doing with their documentary. So those are two entirely different things that have no overlap at all.
No, his feeling about why Gentiles shouldn't use the Talmud, and their feeling about the danger of
Why people shouldn't read. Okay, they are motivated.
Can I
by
finish? Can I finish?
idea.
I'm saying that. I'm saying it again. If you don't let me, so the way Jacob feels about Gentiles reading the Talmud is the same way the makers of Century of the Self feel about people learning Bernays techniques. And unlike Jacob, they are lying about Bernays. They're mischaracterizing Bernays to accomplish their goal. That
Okay,
was my.
first I have to say, no, because it's not like I believe there's information in the Talmud that you would use somehow to your benefit, right? They are presenting Bernays' book propaganda, which any of you can spend an hour on YouTube and go through and get all the information out of, and you should, right? They are trying to stop people from doing that because they want to control people. That's not why I say Gentiles should not study Talmud.
Oh,
at all.
Thought it was. My bad.
No, it's not. It's because I believe it's spiritually harmful and completely useless to you. Which is why if somebody like what's his name? Why am I forgetting his name? The guy who came on, like, I have gone through Talmudic parts with lots of people. My most recent video with Father Stephen, I took him through the Talmud, right? I'm not hiding anything. I don't believe Talmudic study is spiritually helpful to Gentiles. It is spiritually helpful to Jews.
What is the spiritual difference there?
I believe, and this is what Judaism's always taught, there is a spiritual difference between Jew and Gentile.
But even
what is it?
But hold on, Grim.
What is it, Jacob?
What do you mean? What is it?
There is a spiritual difference.
Yes, we are the chosen people. What?
But there's a cultural difference in either case. So any book brought into a different culture has a different meaning. Absolutely.
Well, okay, that's your belief. No, I mean, Grim, I believe that God created human beings differently. And I believe that he created Jewish souls differently from Gentile souls.
Okay. Created differently. Please explain.
Explain creation, Jacob. Come
I
on.
honestly,
You should be
yeah,
able-
How
I
what
honestly
is
don't
the difference
understand
in the
what you want me to
creation of your soul and the creation of my soul?
It is the same difference as the difference between the creation of your heart muscles from your arm muscles, from your fat cells, from your eye cells, from your brain cells, from all the different parts of your body have different types of cells. Different. The humanity has different types of cells.
And each
that
cell
God created.
performs a specific function.
Exactly. Yes.
What is the function of the Gentile, Jacob Federici?
Depends. There are
What
different
is the
types of Gentiles.
spiritual function? Because we're talking about a
There are
spiritual
there are
difference.
70 nations of Gentiles.
All right. What is the function of one of the 70 nations? Spiritual.
So
What is the
Israel
spiritual function?
is the head, and the other 70 nations are the different parts of the body.
They're to follow, right? They're
Well, I mean the neck,
or to be led.
the head, right?
Which of the Gentile nations is the anus, Jacob? Which of the Gentile nations is the anus?
What nation are you in, Graham? Let us know.
Egypt, actually. Ervat Haaretz, Egypt.
All right, that's a good enough soundbite for me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm Griswold Grimm. I have my own channel, Patreon, and the Substack.
Can a soul of a Jew be reincarnated into a Gentile? Yeah, thank you for the loaded question. Yes, it can. It was a loaded question. Okay.
There's
we have 5
reincarnation?
minutes before I'm leaving. What?
You guys have reincarnation?
Transmigration of souls, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were anti-reincarnation believers.
Nope. Transmigration of souls happens in Orthodox Judaism, we believe. You can be reincarnated into inanimate objects, even.
Really?
But, yes, but being reincarnated is in Jewish terms the equivalent of flunking a grade.
Okay, so it's more like India, like
it's remedial. I mean, people are reincarnated because they failed to do in previous lives those things which they were supposed to do.
That's Hinduism, yeah. And
Buddhism has a similar idea. Yes, Buddhism does have a similar idea. Yes.
Yes. Oh, look at that! I learned something new today. Thank you, Jake. That's very helpful. I had no idea.
No, it's not 144,000. It's actually 600,000. Sorry. He gets that number from Revelation, and Revelation is wrong.
I see. Why is the number relevant? I mean, does anybody think the numbers are supposed to be hard stops on things?
Yeah, the people who take so Revelation talks about those who claim to be Jews who are not Jews, and for thousands of years, Christians have used that as an excuse to kill Jews.
So, how if there's a spiritual difference between Jewish souls, how does it work to add people into the faith? Like, how does conversion work at all then?
So, most of the mystics would say that somebody. So, okay. How much do you know about Jewish astrology?
Oh, my Jewish astrology is rusty because that goes all the way back to my occult studies. So
yes, so
back.
in Jewish astrological belief, we believe that we live in a time in which things are not spiritual. The spiritual connection between the upper realm and the lower realms is not clear. That's why in Jewish astrology, when somebody asks you about Jewish astrology, the answer is we don't know. And we believe we don't know. In a similar way, there is not a one-to-one relationship with between the soul that your spirit, where your spirit comes from and where it manifests in the world. And therefore, when somebody who has a Jewish soul in a Gentile body converts, they are actually returning the spark where it needs to be.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
Yep. So how have you been, Mark? What'd you do for Thanksgiving?
Oh, so there's so Kira moved down here from California a few years ago, right? A couple years back. And she made friends with her neighbors.
Okay.
And well, she's one of the people that I met on Discord. And they did Thanksgiving last year at Kira's house. And the neighbors had come over, and then the neighbors did Thanksgiving, and they invited me along. So we did Thanksgiving, and we played games, and it was short because
same Kira, the Russian Kira.
No, she's not Russian.
Okay, I'm thinking of somebody else then.
Yeah, no, she was trapped in California during COVID, and then she moved down to South Carolina, actually, right near my house, right down the street. Found a lovely house on a lake and stuff that they purchased. So.
Okay, I'm thinking of Nora, maybe Nodrick.
Nodrick,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's Kara.
That's okay. See, I wasn't that far off.
So many names.
Yes. So that sounds good.
Yeah,
how are things over at Navigating Patterns?
They're good. I was thinking of recording a couple of videos. I haven't been feeling well because Thanksgiving. But I'm thinking about some videos. I want to do another Don't Be Fooled because we like this idea of Defense Against the Dark Arts. And it's like, well, I have a series called Don't Be Fooled, which is basically the same. I'm with you on this relabeling everything. It's like we don't need new names for things. We have perfectly good names for it. Like this is not helpful, right? When people and it's ironic too, right? So
I dislike reinventing the wheel, and I think that if there are older concepts which are precisely the same or even close enough, that if you make new names for them, that's just leading people astray. At the same time, I have to say, some people have this what do you call it? Neophilitism. Like they just love neologisms. They just they refuse to consider any idea merely because it is old.
Right. Well, and also I think we're so stuck on inventing things ourselves for ourselves so that we can feel like we've done that we're not willing to engage with those existing ideas, right? We're not willing to go, oh, debates are a thing. Like we know what they are. We know how to do them. There's a lot of good skills around debating. There's a lot of good ways and formats for debating. So we can just have a debate. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We can call it debate. That's what it's called, right? We can say things like "Don't be fooled." We don't need to turn it into a Harry Potter meme, But on the other hand, and this is where I have a problem, right? Because it's a struggle. It's a real struggle, right? Vervaeke is coming at his terms honestly because he doesn't have conceptions for the Christian versions of those terms, and so there's got to be a bridge there somewhere, right? Because the concept of distributed cognition is stupid and obvious, but whatever. But I recognize it's useful, right? And it's it's fantastically useful because it is a concept that was taken for granted for so long that you didn't need to talk about it. Right? It was taken for granted, but now we need to bring it to the fore. So there's that condition. there's the condition of somebody coming into a concept and not realizing it's mirrored on the other side and having an allergy to using that religious language, like Dawkins is a good example of this, right? Or Vervaeke, right? And so you run into these problems. So I'm always trying to split that difference somehow, and it's very difficult. So I mean, I have some, but when you're reinventing debate and you're reinventing things like stuff to watch out for, so you're not fooled, or Bullshit, which was a great TV show by Penn and Teller. I don't know if they still do it. What a fantastic show that was.
Don't. Yeah. Okay. This is getting interesting, but it is becoming the Sabbath, and my parents are expecting me. 21 people are watching. You have admin privileges, so you can keep this going as long as you would like.
Okay.
But I am actually going to head out.
Enjoy your
This
Sabbath.
is my show. Thank you. I will talk to you later.
See ya. We have lost our leader, Jacob. How upsetting. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. I know he posted the link, but 21 people. My goodness. I wonder, Michelle, did you see the earlier part of the stream where he was going over the video that Grimm did? That was very interesting. It was quite the video with Grimm and Chad and their and Chris, actually. Always good to see those three together. It was an interesting commentary. It's always interesting to watch other people's thoughts on things that you've seen. So securing your cognition. Yeah, so let me just highlight that. I'm just not super prepared. There's Richard. Yeah, hey Richard, it's good to see you, sir. I just want to deal with this comment, and then we can jump into whatever you like. So, yeah, I mean, one of the problems that I have with some of Jacob's conceptions is that we know how to secure cognition, right? But the problem is it requires you to engender more humility, right? So you have to stop trying to figure out what's right and wrong for yourself by yourself, right? So you secure cognition by getting into a community that gives you the cognition that you need, and then basically somewhat cloistering yourself off from alternate sources, right? And I mean, the Jews do that, right? They cloister themselves to a very large degree, right? Sabbath, what's that? Right? Like, oh, what do they do every evening, right? Although maybe not every evening, because I did get my Orthodox Jewish friend sent me a happy Thanksgiving, and it was past dark, and I was like confused. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What's he doing? Because he's, as far as I knew, he shut off his phone every night. But maybe not. But it was nice to hear from him because he's a good friend of mine. So yeah, when you take yourself out and build your own community and your own sense-making apparatus, you've secured your cognition. Now, I think the problem is when people talk about these things, they want perfection. And let me explain to you what doesn't exist. Perfection. It's always trade-offs, always suboptimal. It's always not right and not what you want. Always. And people just don't want that. Like, oh, anything but that. I want it to be perfect, and perfect is the way I want it. And it's like, well, both those things are obviously false. Like, you're a Muppet, I'm a Muppet, we're all Muppets, okay? We don't even know what we want at all. We really don't. Just meditate. Go ahead. I dare ya. You'll figure out real quick there's stuff going on in your head that you had no idea about. And there's things bopping you around and pulling you in different directions. And yeah, I mean, we don't know what we want. And that's part of the problem. It's part of Peterson's message that sort of gets lost, I think. But Richard, welcome. What would you like to say on this or any other topic, please?
Well, I just didn't want to leave you all alone. So
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Did you have a good Thanksgiving? It's good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. I traveled the 12th or 2. Because I was in New York for a concert. So we left on Thanksgiving Day, flew home, got back to our town at like 10:30 at night, and so we went into a grocery store and basically got a load of leftover cuts from the turkeys that they were selling, and my dad's a slow cooker, so we sat down at 1 in the morning, I think, and watched a James Bond film, and that was my Thanksgiving.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we watched Die Hard, the best Christmas movie of all time, of course. So yeah, that was cool.
I need to watch Die Hard. I've never seen it.
What? Oh, I can't talk to you anymore. We can't be friends. I'm sorry.
I'm not a big movie guy. It's a shame.
Yeah, but Die Hard. Like, come on. That's like, I haven't seen The Matrix. It's like, what? Are you
I had
human?
seen The
Like,
Matrix.
okay, good, good.
Although I hadn't seen it until I was 16, so.
No, that's okay. But like, you know, once you're 18, if you haven't seen certain movies, are you really a person? I gotta question it.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I have been watching a lot of movie reviews. Is what I've been doing.
Yeah, you gotta watch. You gotta watch Casablanca, right? You gotta watch The Maltese Falcon. That's a great movie. Key Largo, The Maltese Falcon.
Okay.
Key Largo, like that, you know, some real classics. Yeah, there's a bunch of classic films from back in the day that I just must watches, you know.
Yeah, I do want to watch Taxi Driver. Listening to Brett Howard talk about New York. I wanted to.
That's another seminal, cultural altering film for sure. And like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is also I mean, aside from being a relatively good movie, that just changed everything. That book and that movie.
What's that one about?
That's the one that changed how we deal with the mentally ill in the entire United States and possibly the world. It was that's.
What is it called?
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Okay. Okay. I have seen Godfather.
The Godfather. Oh yeah, that's another good. Yeah. There's a ton of really good, important films out there, right?
I've seen a lot of random 90s rom-coms because of my mom. Richard, stop what you're doing. I'm making you watch a film. And so.
There are some really good rom-coms too that were culture changing for sure. But there were also some really good ones. So.
Mean Girls. I've seen Mean Girls.
I've never seen that.
Okay. That one's, at least in my generation, you know, what it's known for is there's a map of the school cafeteria, and each table is labeled with like what clique sits there. So you got the jocks, the Asian nerds, the all of the different groups got canonized in that.
Gotcha. Made explicit the things that were implicit. I think that's part of the problem with the culture is we've made a bunch of things explicit that were implicit and hidden, and now we have a bunch of problems because people are pointed at those things and then trying to change them. But the reason why they were implicit is because they're just fundamental to functioning. And and this goes back to, how do you secure distributed cognition? Well, you do the way we've been doing it, which is to keep your culture separate. And when you don't do that, you run into problems because you can't. There's too much data to take in. And it was interesting because the clip they were playing earlier, I know Jacob didn't quite get it, but we strayed into expertise territory for me, which is computers and AI. And part of the clip that Grimm was playing was Andrew Karpathy talking about who's a famous AI guy. Basically, he did some pretty cool stuff. He made an AI in 200 lines of code in Python that would play Pong, the Atari 2600 Pong or something, or a classic Pong game. So everyone's like, wow, and of course it's not really 200 lines of code because you're importing other code, but
Right.
irrespective, it's 200 lines for you. It's 200 lines of your code for sure, right? But then he was talking about optimization, but at two different scales, and yeah, but that's not optimization at that point, right? He's really talking about attention at the higher scale and optimization at the lower scale, and like he might understand that because he's really smart, but most computer people don't understand the difference of scale, so they don't understand that there's a fundamental difference in calculating something, say, within a domain like a facial recognition, and calculating whether or not you should do facial recognition or object recognition. Those are two different problems with no overlap whatsoever at all. We know this too. We've known this for 20, 30 years at least. And so I don't know, like I don't know where the confusion is. Like you can read the books, I can show them to you, they exist. We do know this. But I think that's the problem that Jacob and I were talking about earlier. We prefer new things. Yeah, but you're not reading about the history, the stuff they already knew. Like what you're not reading about what conclusions they came to as the result of the analysis. You're just assuming, you're starting in the middle and assuming like, oh, we can do these things, so we can do these other things. And it's like the people who think that artificial general intelligence is close. Artificial general intelligence is so far away, it's not even worth thinking about, I promise you. It really, really isn't. And that was one of the other problems in the video that Grimm put on. He's like, well, he pretty much stated what we're doing is we're looking at the AI guys and we're reverse engineering our own cognition. And I'm like, well, the AI guys aren't actually anywhere close to how the brain works. And they know this. Yeah. You look at Bori Kogsai, you look at Vervaeke's work. How many types of memory are there? 4. How many types of memory are there in AI? Actually 0 in most, although there's long-term and short-term, right? There's recurrent and the LTSMs. So, but even that doesn't work the way our memory works. It's not even close. Right. So you can't take a bad model and then reverse engineer the better thing. That doesn't make any sense. That makes literally no sense. So, I think this is a good question, Red Trek. Look, I think Peterson put this to rest. Right? AI made no progress until they put it in an object, right? Or simulated it being in an object. You can do that too, although that's less optimal. So yeah, AGI is of course going to need embodiment. I mean, even Vervaeke recognizes at this point that embodied knowledge is basic and more important, and all other types of knowledge flow from that in his own model. So if you don't have embodied knowledge, you probably can't have any other kind of understanding of the world. And that, I would say, is the weakness of AI in general. It's why AI runs stop signs. So yeah, Rodney Brooks is the guy who talked about that according to Peterson. So yeah, but he's also the one that solved it. But it's Piaget, for example, knew about. Like, we've known about this because this is the problem. Everyone's like, oh, these aren't new discoveries at all. They're not even close to new discoveries. They're things we actually know and have books and papers up the wazoo on. And in fact, we have good scientific papers from back before the replication crisis. So I would argue real science. If you want real science, you got to go back 20 years before the replication crisis, because then you're more likely to get good papers. It's not 100%. There's lots of bad papers, but there's a lot fewer bad papers in the past than there are now. I'll tell you that much. I picked one up recently so a buddy of mine was showing me a paper on drug use. And what they did was they took psilocybin and compared it to one of the SSRIs. That was the paper. Well, the first problem with that is that's not science. That's not how you do science at all. Comparing one drug to another, The second problem is the paper about SSRIs being completely ineffective has come out. SSRIs are not effective. Really? So you're comparing an ineffective drug to psilocybin, to mushrooms. And guess what? Their efficacy is the same. I'm so shocked by this result. And how many people were in the study? So it started with 100, and then they self-selected, right?
Oh no. Yeah.
But, right. It's like bad science. You start with a sample size of 100. Worse science. You let the sample size self-select, right? So now you're down to 30, right?
Well,
so now you've got a third of the original number that's insignificant statistically, and then you write a paper. And that's basically what I told my friend is, this paper is a good example of everything that's wrong with modern scientific papers. It's made almost every mistake in the book.
Well, it's funny because when I took intro to statistics, one of the conditions you had to check for using the central limit theorem and for generalizing a sample was that your sample had to be at least greater than 10. And I'm like, 10? No way
10?
that's your,
Oh my goodness.
no way that's your baseline, right? Yeah. Is n greater than or equal to 10? Is one of the
Your sample size can be 10 if the total possible population is 100.
Right.
But if it's bigger than 100, 10 is not sufficient. Like, that's just wrong. It's just mathematically incorrect and obviously. But that's the problem. Like, they're just telling people bad things all over the place. It's sad. It's sad to watch.
Yeah. And then one of the funniest experiences I've had is one of the only papers I've read in this area is John Searle's Chinese room argument. You probably read it. Classic paper. You know that paper, right?
Not off the top of my head.
So yeah, it's I think John Searle was a philosopher of mind, but he was arguing that computers don't have consciousness because apparently that was an open question in the 80s. Yeah.
Why do I live in this world? Why do I live in this world? So they don't even have a definition for consciousness, and then they're gonna make claims about who and what does and doesn't have it. Yeah. Well, that came out at the conference in Thunder Bay, right? And I oh yeah. So Dr. Mandral, who's very good, by the way, he's excellent. But he's I mean, everybody admitted they didn't have a good definition of consciousness. But one of the doctors he cited, and he did a very good job. One of the doctors he cited was measuring consciousness. And I was like, so you have a measure without a definition? This is science today, huh? Is it? That's fantastic. And then, of course, the example that he used, because he's, like I said, he's a good guy. It didn't work. His measure was wrong. Like, really? I'm shocked. It was because the example was he was measuring. He would talk to patients who were in comas or whatever, and measure their brain activity. And so he'd say something like, "Think about the time you were on a swing," or some goofy thing like that. And then, and then if there was no brain activity, he assumed it didn't work. And then he talks to this one guy who survived. Right? He did a follow up a year later. And the mother's like, "Oh no, you can talk to him." And he's like, "What?" Because he thought he was dead, so he didn't, he had no idea. No. And the guy goes, "Oh yeah, I remember you asking me that question." And then it's like, what? There's no brain activity, but you remember me asking you the question? Now we're not even into consciousness. We're into how the hell does the brain work? Like, we do not know how the brain works at all. We don't know anything about memory. That's what that means. It doesn't mean anything else, by the way. It means we have no idea how the memory works. None. Zero. We do not know how the signals get from the ear into your memory. We have no idea. And these people are like, we're going to measure consciousness. And I'm like, you don't even know how memory works. What are you talking about? You're all lunatic.
Yeah. And the more and more I've looked into science, the more, how you say this, like, the more creativity I see is involved.
Yeah. Well, and there's some really, but there's some really good science out there, and it's really solid and it's well backed up. And, right. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's just done to get the creds, right? It's just done. There's perverse incentives, and people aren't paying attention to the perverse incentives. And I saw a tweet recently, I forget who it was, but somebody tweeted out that Nature, the journal Nature, the famous scientific journal Nature, is no longer valid. And I forget what they were quoting, but it was the statement was so absurd. I was like, yeah, that sounds right to me. They've lost all their credibility. Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, look, but Red Trek brings up a good point. See, damn, but Sam Harris told me my brain scan solved consciousness. You can't argue with the brain scans. So, yeah, I mean, we see it with a telescope, so it must exist. Unlike God, we don't see him or heaven. Can't see God or the place he lives. So he must not exist. Can confirm. I'm glad Sam Harris is not a staunch, ridiculous, hardcore materialist, because that would be awkward. Yeah, these people, if I can't use my science on it, it's not reality. Really? Is that how reality works? And then the next thing you know, they're talking about egregores. Because what choice do they have? Because they can't measure the things that are happening in the world. And then they go like, it must be an egregore. Well, okay, I guess. I don't know. I suppose.
Yeah.
It's so funny, the traps they fall into are a riot.
Yeah, and then that goes back to what you're talking about with the unnecessary redefining of things.
Yeah.
So we have words for this, and we have a way of interacting with these things already through, prayer and meditation, I think, and you
Right.
should at least check it out before.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the problem is we've educated people in a certain way. And I have a great video on navigating patterns and education and training that everybody should check out because it's underwatched. And it's really good. So I talk about certain changes happened in the American school system at the same time, right? I'm not saying they removed entirely, but they took out recess, gym, music, and art and prayer all at the same time, roughly, in schools over the course of some years, right? So they've removed all that stuff. The thing about all of those things is that all of those things are participatory, right? And it replaced them with propositions. And like if you use the model, and that's another video I have, the knowledge engine video on my channel. If you use the model that we're using, you can kind of see why that's a problem. It totally makes sense. The results that would occur from that would look a lot like Sam Harris, right? It would look a lot like what you're seeing in the world with this material reality as material, or reality as physical. This Vervaeke calls it the physicalist reductionist attitude. So you know that's what you see in the world, and I think you see that because we're focused on propositions and procedures as types of information, ways of informing the world, rather than being focused on informing the world through participation and poetics. And so part of what I think reality is that which objects, right? So reality is the thing that objects to your subjective model of the world. So when you come up with a model of the world that says, like, I can float through the air unaided, you go outside and try to float in the air unaided, and gravity says no. Gravity objects.
So what kind of knowledge is the model? Is it participatory?
No, the model. The model has two types of knowledge. It's four types of. I think Vervaeke's wrong. It's four types of information. That's what he's describing as information. It, to some extent, it's kind of a basic error. Oh, I'm linking these four things to memory. Do we remember knowledge? No, we don't. We remember information, and we form the information into knowledge, right? So I think that's a basic error. So it's four types of information, right? And then it's two types of knowledge. It's particular knowledge and intuitive knowledge. And that makes more sense to me. It seems to match a lot of the stuff that's in the ancient wisdom texts. It seems to match a lot of how people feel and think about things. And then I've got a new thesis coming up. I talked to my buddy Jefferson on Clubhouse. He's the redneck philosopher king. Really smart guy. Like, he's unbelievable. He's so well read. It's insane. He's got this almost absurd Southern accent. It's lovely. I love Southern accents, so it's cool. So you know, and he rambles a lot, which is funny. He's very good on Twitter, though. Twitter is excellent for him. He makes the best points on Twitter because he can't ramble. But he was talking about, well, look, you know, when I'm driving, I can drive and I can listen to a book, no problem. Or I can, you know, build a motor, or, you know, he does a bunch of, he's got more hobbies than you can shake a stick at. You know, it's anything he's doing with his hands or whatever. He says, I can do that and I can listen to like a book. But I can't do that if I'm listening to a really deep Peterson talk or a really deep Vervaeke or even a Paul Vanderklay. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I'm thinking back, right? And I'm like, oh yeah. So it seems like there's a balance of attention between particular knowledge and intuitive knowledge. And we've sort of started, I mean, we're going to run some experiments actually on ourselves, because what else do we have? But yeah, right. And I talked to Manuel about it, and he's like, yeah, I think that's true. And then Sally Joe piped in and she said, yeah, I don't work like that. So Sally Joe is always a good exception that proves the rule for us. She thought that was correct, because she's actually the opposite. So when she's doing something with her hands or whatever, she likes to listen to the intellectual stuff, and she doesn't. It's the other way around for her. And I'm like, yeah, you would be backwards, because she's an artist. Artists are backwards. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a fascinating sort of a difference. Hello, Noah.
Hello. I don't mean to interrupt your stream of consciousness that second, though. Sorry.
That's okay.
You were talking about a lot of the failings of the scientific world, and I was just kind of like thinking the whole time, isn't this more like the broken ego or the broken God complex of the human being pushed onto the science, and the human wanting to always be right, therefore science, even though science isn't necessarily, it's like we lost the certainty of God, and then science became the God, even if the science isn't really the answer. There's a faith that the thing exists, that there's no questioning allowed. It's almost like a circular thing happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I would cast it the other way around. I would say that our egoic self wants to play God. I mean, I wish somebody had written that down in a book a couple thousand years ago, not to do that. But you know what? I bet even if they wrote it down, no one would read it. And I bet even if they read it, they wouldn't understand it. I bet even if they read it and understand it, they'd still do it. Because humans are Muppets. We're all Muppets. Yeah, no, I think it's science, the way science is portrayed is a lie. Like, a lot of people think things about science, and I'm just like, I don't know what science you're studying. But you talk to a physicist, and they'll tell you all the things they don't know, and it's all things that people think physicists know. Like, it's a long list. It's a very long list, and it's the same for every branch of science. So the people who aren't actually talking to experts in those fields believe those experts have answers to things that they don't actually have answers to. So the portrayal of science becomes one of knowledge of things that we do not have knowledge of, and then they extrapolate from there and say, well, it looks like the tools of science are highly successful, and those tools, roughly speaking, for me, are logic, reason, and rationality. And then they say, well, because logic, reason, and rationality provide us with accuracy and precision, which they absolutely do, and it's so successful, and there's so much of it that we can just use that everywhere. And see, that feeds our ego, because now we can be accurate, precise about the world. We can know what's going on. And that's the impression that, so what they do is they say, well, we just need more science, which is a perfectly valid thing to think if you make the first set of mistakes, presumption mistakes. And I think that's what's going on. Like, we just see this tool and we go, aha, we can use this tool on everything. And like the ancient Greeks knew that wasn't true. They were quite certain that there was, you know, it's a modern conception religion, post 1530. But the post 1530 conception of religion would never have occurred to the ancient Greeks. The religion was just the water you swim in. Like they didn't, you know, philosophy was the thing that wasn't religion, and the two never shall meet. Right? They knew this. They had an inherent sense for the Izot gap that we have been ignoring or outright denying ever since.
I mean, we literally just are living through the global form of this, and almost like a genocide-like factor in the way that we treated the exploration of medicine in the last 2 years was bordering on mass insanity, where people were like, the science will tell us. I'm like, no, you're using an ego trip and a power trip in order to define what is allowed to be the science. Facts be damned. And in medicine, you don't know what you don't know due to multifactual errors and things that we don't even understand how they interact. You find out maybe 10 years later that the thing that you ate 2 years ago, you know, whatever, has a long-term effect that's so much worse than the short-term gain. And I personally have been going through like anger or mental breakdown watching people who claim to follow science completely go along with the cult. I'm just like, you're a fucking doctor. I was in the medical field. I'm not a doctor, but I'm smart enough to realize that you are totally giving up any form of medicine here. You're just going with the authorities. It's like mind-blowing.
Well, but you can imagine that if religion is inevitable, like if religion is the natural water you swim in the state, and you deny it, that it's going to come flooding back in some form or other, right? And so if it's inescapable and unavoidable, because we need to have faith in something, for example, then that's what's going to happen, right? You're going to, and I think, you know, the postmodern idea of effectively postmodernism is a sneaky destruction, because it effectively says all frames are equal and equally valid, which is obviously false. And therefore frames have no value. That's what follows from that thought, even if you don't state it. And then, so now people are like, well, I can just impose my subjective experience on whatever I want. And then this feeds into what we were talking about earlier with there's this love of new things. It's like, but none of them are new. Like debate is not a new concept, right? Like the things that Grimm talks about often have better words that have been around for thousands of years in many cases. And he's just reinventing old concepts, right? And putting new words on them. And it's like, but we have this. We have all this stuff. We should just start using it. Like, I don't understand, right? But that's what's going to happen when you think that, you know, you're new to the world and the world is new. It's like, you may be new to the world, but the world is not new.
For sure. Hey, have you ever heard of Landmark?
In what context?
All right, so everybody's talking about postmodernism and everything else like that. And I went through like, I guess something we call the Landmark Forums like several years back. And it was like literally like a weekend deconstruction of the human ego self along their lines. I'm like, I was able to watch the room like kind of like their brain short circuiting on it. And it didn't affect me like it affected the other people around me. Like I could put myself into the place of where they were, but it didn't like rework my world like it did for other people. Like I saw some people who came out of that and it caused them to go become trans or something like that. It was the ultimate form of like a weekend being walked through like what postmodernism is in order to create the self, which it has tons of tools with it and had a really great way of third person viewing myself. But at the end of the weekend, I was like, wow, this is how Nazism was birthed. Because if the world is empty and meaningless and you add meaning to it, that means somebody can really add whatever the fuck they want and it could be really bad.
Right, Dylan. I have heard of that. Yeah, I forget when, a year and a half ago or somebody introduced me to that, and I was like, oh, that looks evil. Like that's really and you know the problem is it's not in and of itself evil, right? But again,
no.
When you introduce people who do not have a worldview into something that can replace your worldview, they'll get to weird, especially if they do it themselves, right? And this is what Jacob's talking about, I think, when he says you can't think for yourself. Like, yeah, you really shouldn't, because we outsource. I like Paul VanderKlay's, we outsource our sanity. Yeah, we outsource our sanity. So if you think that you can just, gin up your own world to live in, maybe you can, but you're going to separate yourself from everybody else, right? And that's where the intimacy crisis work comes in. That's what people are doing. They're preferring their subjective experience over the intersubjective experience where they can cooperate with others by using the same language, right? By doing the same things, by engaging in the same rituals, by being in the same spaces, by, having similar aims.
Well, the interesting part of it is the language that they used inside of it was, I went through this like a decade ago. So a lot of the things that came out as things got more crazier in perspective, I was just like, okay, I can see these things happening. One of their big revelations is that the world is empty and meaningless, and that humans add meaning to the world. Like, if you die, whatever, the world's just going to go on. It's there, so that humans themselves are meaning-making machines, which I can totally see that.
Well, that's true.
We make
that's
our
true.
meaning.
We participate. Yeah, we participate in the making of meaning, right? Well, but
yes.
So this is so I've been trying to get this through to VanderKlay and crew, right? The reason why they get there is because they're ignoring creation. Like, that's the only way you can get to that conclusion, right? Because it's not wrong that we make meaning. Well, I'll go through it. It's not wrong that we make meaning. Certainly, we make meaning. There's no question of it. It's easy to understand.
Humans are meaning-making machines. It's
right. Like, that's a true statement. But
yeah,
we don't do it by ourselves on our own, and we don't do it by ourselves and with others, right? There's also nature, which pre-exists us, oddly enough. I don't know if you noticed. If you go outside, there's this thing bigger than you that you're walking within, and it's called nature, right? And so you're making the meaning with creation, like with nature, right? And then you're also making it with yourself, because again, you don't know what you're up to. Go meditate for a while. We'll see what's going on in your head. Sit against a blank wall for 20 minutes if you can. And we'll see it. We'll see what's going on in your head real quick, right? But also with others, right? So there's you with yourself, you with others, and you with nature. And that's how you're making all this meaning. And when you deny that you've been dropped into this thing that is unfolding, and you can say, oh, it's unfolding through evolution, right? And you can whine that, like Vervaeke does, that evolution has no telos. That's fine all day long. I don't care. But evolution
I don't know if I would agree with that.
No. It's probably wrong, but it doesn't matter, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Even if evolution doesn't have a telos, it's at least a process that's unfolding in a way, right?
Sure.
In other words, preference. It has preference. That preference has to come from creation. Right? There's no other option. So then creation has a telos. In other words, there's a telos somewhere. Otherwise, evolution doesn't work. Like, the concept of evolution can't concept. The whole set of theories fails immediately. So if there's a telos in creation, then that means meaning, because you do it within creation, has to have a telos, right? In other words, there's right meaning and wrong meaning. And you know that from evolution, right? Because if you don't survive whatever meaning you manifested for however long you manifested it, doesn't carry on. And by survive, I don't mean you personally, right? Because you can put things into the world or manipulate creation to some extent and make it last in such a way that it outlasts you. But you can't do that in a way that defies creation. So, for example, you can't just say, you know what we're going to do? We're all going to get together and we're going to do away with gravity. That's what we're going to do. It's not going to work. And
to a certain extent for a few moments.
Right. But it's not going to last. Right. And that's where they get tripped up, because the first variable that you control for in science is time. And you have to. Right. Because otherwise, what is rust? Everything is rusting all the
Oxidation.
time.
Yeah, everything oxidizes.
Everything is oxidizing all the time. So the word rust has no meaning unless you constrain it by time. And they do this with everything in science, because it's the first variable you have to control for. Otherwise, you can't define anything in science at all. Literally. I mean, this is well known. I didn't make this up. This is actually written about in books. And so when you do that, when you start flattening time and ignoring the time variable, because science very much ignores the time, they may state it, but they don't talk about the changes that happen when you unconstrain time. So everybody does that. They just think, well, I do this thing in the world and then instantly, right, stuff happens. Like, Elon Musk buys Twitter and instantly he fires everybody, and then instantly the app crashes. That's not, things don't happen instantly. So no, that's not how it works. And time, the longer time period you have, the easier it is to adjust to the changes you just made. So there's a speed, a rate at which you can make changes where the effect can be generative and not degenerative, right? And sometimes it's the other way around, but more often you want to take more time to make changes, not less. And we're living in a world that's speeding up. And what we're seeing is more chaos. And I think, well, duh, of course.
I wonder if that's part of the problem, is there's just lack of reflection.
Yes. Well, there is. Well, people are expecting things to happen instantly. They really are expecting immediate change. And they're making, so in the model that I use in the knowledge engine model video with the slide, it's a discrete linear relationship, right, on one side of the brain, right? The propositions and procedures are discrete and linear. And what that means is that there's a one-to-one relationship, and that's it. And it's a straight line. But on the other side of your brain, where you do things like reflection and create knowledge properly, those are nonlinear and continuous, right? It's a continuous process. And any time you take a continuous process and divide it up into discrete layers, which you can do, that's what analog to digital conversion is technically, right? You lose data, you lose information, you lose something, and you don't know what you're losing. Right. So that's the problem. We've discretized the world to try and make it logical, rational, and reasonable. And the problem is, we equivocate on the word reason. We're not using reason as telos, which we should be. We're using reason as oh shoot, I usually have this well at hand, but my brain is tired. We're using reason as excuse, right? Or reason as the pathing that we use to get from point A to point B. We're not using reason as final cause. And that's why I want to make final cause great again. It's Aristotle and all.
I can see that, and at the same time, I see on the flip side of everything is where forces that are that know better. I say that, just because it's obvious they know better, are purposely creating massive schisms within society of people who reject reality completely, but are living within like a belief structure akin to dualism. I'm trying to think of the proper way of explaining it, but it's almost like we're living in some kind of like strange cult version of dualism, which communism was a form of that. And I know I'm sounding really crazy right now. I'm struggling for the words on it. But I don't see logic happening anymore. I see people purposely deranged in order to lead them in a direction that was pre-chosen. Like watching people power structures purposely deranging people knowledgeably ahead of time in order to accomplish a mission. Like do this thing over here, then it forces them to go that direction.
Well, but you're assuming that there's a telos in the actions that are done, and I think the problem is that that's what chaos is. It's the thing that there's no point. And so the example I like to give is the rioters. So if you look at rioters in, say, Seattle or something, while
So they make
they're
sense to me.
Well, while the rioters are all doing the same thing in some
Right.
sense, they're not all there for the same reason. So
Right.
the result is the same. But some of them are there because they legitimately just want to tear the system down. They're anarchists, right? And they
Right.
stated, and I believe them. That seems to be true, right? Some of them, however, are there because, to Grim Grizz's point, they're LARPing, right? They're like, we want to get arrested, and because we want this thing, this Rage Against the Machine, great band, by the way, or at least they were, to be true. Like, we want to live in this world because we know how to fix this world. Like, look, if Hitler were alive today and he were in charge, we know exactly how to fix that. And so they're trying to create the world they know how to fix. Like, they really are. And then there's other people who just want to loot things because it's tough, right? And they're all contributing to the riot. But a riot, even though we refer to it as one thing, is not one thing because it's just people getting together, destroying order in different ways. And that's really what it is.
Well,
it's like
actually,
homelessness, right? It's the same thing with homelessness. Homelessness is a pit of people who got there through very different paths. And so you can't just solve it by giving everybody a home. We know this. This experiment's been done for hundreds of years, actually, over and over again. Because the reason they got there isn't solved by giving them a home. They got homeless for most of them. The largest chunk of homeless people is people with mental illness, by the way, right?
Sure.
But some of them didn't get there that way. Like, and so you can't solve that problem by just putting people in housing. It doesn't work.
Well, I guess, okay, so in riots, I tend to see something different than what most people think of. I tend to think of them as like a cell can be looked at one way, but a human body has a different telos than the cell. And
Right.
humans within crowds behave as an organic organism that is superior to the individual. Like
Right.
people's brains stop functioning on the singular level within crowds, and the crowd takes on its own zeitgeist or its own organic being that is outside of the individual. Like if you break the individual out of that, they will totally go, what the hell was I thinking? But when they're in there, they're part of something that is superior to their own individuality.
Well, because I think Jacob's right. You don't ever think for yourself. That doesn't happen, right? You use distributed cognition, and when you're trapped in the distributed cognition, this is the whole problem with mobs, right? Mobs have a mind of their own. Yeah, it's called a distributed cognition. When you get in a group, the distributed cognition can it doesn't have to, but it can take you over. But then when you get out of that group, you now have a different frame, a different distributed cognition framing to view what you did. And you may change your mind about it. And that's the problem, is people don't take that seriously. Distributed cognition is a real thing. And it's a big problem. Because if you're not aware of it, it owns you.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're in trouble.
Completely. Like, that was one of the things, just watching like all the madness of 2020 and just going, wow, this is like watching another scale of the lead up to Iraq where everybody lost their goddamn mind. Just in a different form.
And that's the thing. When I have this saying, if you believe you don't have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent.
Yeah. And at the same time, I believe that people in power structures know that lesson and purposely wield it.
I think the problem is that this postmodern idea of power is wrong. Like, the postmoderns just use the word power to mean 7 different things all the time. And so they're very confused because they'll use power as influence and power as control, and they'll use power as force. And they just use power for all 3 of those terms and many more. And
but
they
most of the postmodern people they're just drones being used by other people who know those lessons further. I mean, I know I sound conspiratorial, but I've watched too many things and seen too many patterns. And one of the things I really found fascinating is, do you remember back in the Occupy Wall Street time?
Yeah.
Did you ever see there's a guy, I think his name is Nate Goldstein or something like that. I got to look it up. but he did like a LexisNexis search of certain types of societal keywords that came into being and where was their inflection point and where did they suddenly take off. And literally all the woke madness takes off on fire within like a year of Occupy Wall Street. Because that's when really wealthy and smart high up people figured out of, okay, we can take all the heat off of us and we'll just fund all this crazy bullshit. And they started that's the time when they took over like Vice went from being like kooky and weird, and suddenly like all this money flooded into it and it became social justice, and everything in that realm just suddenly like billions and billions of dollars just landed on these activist lunatics' heads. And
I agree with that.
Like the postmodernism was pushed up into the societal zeitgeist by people who are past that point and use it as a weapon.
But there's another narrative that you can use for that actually makes more sense. So one of the things that happened in the middle of Occupy Wall Street. So you don't understand. We're going through Occupy Wall Street. I'm in the middle of a court battle for my house over the 2008 financial crisis because they stole my property from me. Well, yeah, but I went through a 5-year legal battle and spent $50,000 at least. I lost more than that, but I spent at least $50K trying to get my house, which they had no legal right to take at all. They had not a single piece of documentation to back up their claim. And yet the court is sitting there for 5 years entertaining the idea that they have a legal claim when in fact they don't even have a signed piece of paper at all, like not one, right? So they don't have my signature on anything. Like they just had no paperwork because I'd never heard of the bank and I never did business with them. And they
really? That's interesting. So somebody sold your note and the note people went crazy.
Well, not even that. They sold my note to 4 different banks because 4 different banks tried to foreclose.
Really?
Yes. Well, yeah, it's a big fraud. 2008, you can talk about tranches and all that. That's a lie. Not that didn't happen. But what happened was fraud. If you doubt me, you can go on Wikipedia and you can look up Taylor, Bean, and Whitaker. Look at the date. I don't
doubt you. Like,
no. But actually, it's a fascinating story. Look at the date of Taylor, Bean, and Whitaker, and then say, if this company was doing what they were doing, what were the other companies doing? Right? Because they were all doing the same thing. And the irony is the bank that foreclosed on my house, Deutsche Bank, sued the auditors, I think it was Deloitte, but I might be wrong about that, sued them for $4 billion over Taylor, Bean, and Whitaker because they were making up addresses. So here's a company, and this is the thing I don't understand. The company was making money. Like they weren't in default, but the mortgages that the mortgage income, the checks they were claiming that they were getting weren't coming in. They didn't exist. So the question is, how were they able to generate millions of dollars without having income? Like where is the disconnect that the loan servicer is making money off of the bank despite not having the money coming in? Because I know a lot about that business. I worked in banking for a while. So I don't understand that. Sometimes I get tempted to go into that, and usually I avoid it just because I would get down a rabbit hole. I mean, I spent hundreds of hours studying the mortgage crisis. Almost all the mortgage crisis stuff I saw was flat out fraud. There's one guy, famous case in Kentucky, 3 years, paid cash for his house, never had a mortgage on it. They foreclosed on it. Really? Like, yes. That's why I say to people, no, you don't understand. It was only just actual fraud. There was none of the things you think were going on were the cause of the problem. It was really just banks saying they owned stuff that they never owned. It's really all it was, honest engine. And if you look at the court cases, and I did, you'll see that. You'll actually see that.
Isn't it possible that in that regard that it's also in chaos they can steal?
Well, yeah. But so this was my greater point. My greater point was, so what happened in Occupy Wall Street? The bankers come out of Wall Street, literally, and they go up to the organizers and they go, what do you guys want? And and this is on TV. You can watch the footage of this. I don't know where it is, but I mean, I saw the footage. I know it exists. They said, we don't know.
Oh yeah.
And then they said, we want jobs. So the bankers said, okay, we just want to cooperate with you guys. You know, we want to get along. And so the way to get along is to give you what you want, because we're bankers. We can give you whatever you need money-wise. That's their business. Like, we got all the money we have all the money, literally.
Yeah, we print the money. We don't care.
Right. So they just started giving them money. So it wasn't that they were directing them towards the wokeism. The wokeism is a spirit that emerges as the result of paying attention to it. And part of paying attention to something is money. Like, that's a form of attention, right? It's a blatant form of attention. It's a very powerful form of attention, but it's only a form of attention. And it doesn't, like, money doesn't work on me. People offer me money all the time, and I go, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm disagreeable, so go to hell, right? It's just like, no, I'm not doing that job. No, I'm not doing this. And, you know, I could have made, and look, to be fair to myself, had I known I needed more millions than I made in my life so far, I would have changed my mind and taken some of those jobs, but I could have made $5 or $10 million in my 30s pretty easily without a problem.
If you have
I didn't want to do that work.
hints on that now, I'll take it.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I have a certain set of skills, right? So, yeah, I mean, I could jump into AI and revolution the AI industry in about 4 seconds, and I just gave everybody the secret on the stream, although nobody understands that. So
No, actually, I
it's
understood what you're
safe
saying.
on the internet. Don't worry.
No,
People
actually,
don't
what you were
understand
saying
that.
made sense to me.
Yeah, well, but see, that's the thing. Like, the model that they're using for AI is wrong according to cognitive science.
Because it
Full
doesn't have a
stop.
body or a reference point.
Well, in the memory, there's 4 types of memory. There's effectively no types of memory that match the type of memory that we have in our head in the AI model that we use now. So it's way off. It's not even close, right? It's way off.
Okay,
And I'm
what
not
would you explain that as?
Well, look, look, they found a neat thing, right? So computers should be locked in by mathematical certainty. And when you do the sorts of things that they do with neurons, it's not locked in by mathematical certainty. The reason for that is that they're using basically, I'm going to oversimplify it because I have to. They're using basically arrays, and some of them are differently shaped, of random numbers and function generators. The most common of which is sigmoid, which you should never use, by the way. The revolution that Hinton did was Boltzmann machines, which are much more interesting. But there's also a bunch of other functions you can substitute. But when you initialize those arrays with random numbers, you get something that isn't constrained by mathematics in an expected way. It's still probably constrained somewhere, right? But because of that, it can now find a larger field of information than you can using the standard recursion methods. So everybody's like, oh, this is really cool. And so they're down
the
that
question there,
path.
is it really random or is it just a larger pattern?
I would say that if you take Nassim Taleb stuff seriously, and I suggest you do because he's brilliant and all his books are awesome, so you should read them, then you realize, and they did find this recently, that if you have a large enough set of numbers, randomness vanishes as a concept. But you need a very large set of numbers for that to happen. And then if you have a small enough set of numbers, randomness also vanishes, right? So you can't make a random pattern in a binary code. Like, it doesn't work.
Sure, you need 1 or 2.
So randomness exists only at a certain scale. And this is what I keep saying to people. What we don't understand for some reason, even though all the information's there, is scale is the problem. When you're talking about scale, it's a problem. So you can solve a problem. Like, if you and I have a disagreement, there are tools we can use to resolve that disagreement in some fashion, right? It may be agreeing to disagree. It may be, a debate format, right, where one person wins and one person loses based on a scoring system, right? There's lots of ways to do that, right? But you know what? Those tools don't work when you add a third person, because people don't understand that scale matters. And so the things that work inside your head don't work with other people entirely. Some of them do. There's some overlap. The things that work between 2 people don't work when you add a third person, and that problem just gets worse as you go up in scale.
Yeah, and then you add people that fundamentally their purpose is to destroy the idea of agreed upon values. Sorry, I'm just reflecting back towards another thing with the postmodern stuff.
Yeah,
The same
right.
way.
Well, it's actually all tied together, and I think I mean part of the big problem that people are struggling with, and this is Vervaeke's work on this is actually pretty good. He talks about this in the meditation series in Cultivating Wisdom. Our cognitive biases are not things you can get around. In other words, you can't say, oh, well, once you have an IQ of 120, your cognitive biases go away, because they don't. Your susceptibility to cognitive bias does not vary with your intelligence at all, even a little bit. And we actually do know this experimentally, and everybody ignores that fact, right? So they keep treating people like Sam Harris, who obviously has somewhat of an IQ, although I'd argue he's an idiot.
He's an idiot.
Yeah, he's an
His lack of
articulate idiot.
self-awareness is amazing.
Right, but he's very articulate, and that's what fools people, right? It's one of the enchantments is articulation. Enchantment's not a bad thing. Articulation's not a bad thing, right? But you can get fooled by it, right? Because if that's all he has, and that is all he has, because he talks about things and he does nothing of what he's talking about.
Yeah, he has a lot of talking and a very little application.
Right, but he can string together a good set of propositions that sound like they're weaved together very tightly. And Eric Weinstein does this too, right?
Oh God! Yeah.
Unless you know your physics really, really, really well, you won't know that he's lying to you about certain things. And he's probably lying to himself, to be fair. I mean, he's not doing it to you. He's fooled himself.
There's a lot of ego that's going on in that.
Right, and that's the cognitive bias. Like that ego cognitive bias doesn't go away with intelligence, with education, with IQ, with it's just there equally in everybody to some extent, right? So our proclivity to fool ourselves just stymies all of our attempts to not fool ourselves. And there's no way around that except distributed cognition. But now you have to trust other people. And I've met other people, and I have no idea why I would trust them. But you have to. You have no choice, right? So you just have to be careful who you trust about what, right? Like maybe. So I have a good friend who's very smart. He's got a small company, and I mean I love him dearly, and he's got a PhD from MIT. And went to MIT and Harvard, seriously smart dude, one of the smartest people I've ever met for sure. I don't listen to his business advice at all because he just doesn't know it very well. He doesn't know better than I do, for example. So it's not his field, like he shouldn't, right? So, it's useful to know. And not that I don't ask him for business advice, I do, but I don't use it as gospel, we'll say, right? I'm very careful because I have a calculation on what he does and doesn't know about business. So that gives me a sense of how he can be helpful. And that's actually the sort of protection against the distributed cognition problem, right? Is realizing distributed cognition is flawed and experts are flawed, and therefore you need to have an understanding of what you're going to trust them with and what you're not. And it's when you don't make that discernment, there's a problem. But making that discernment is a hell of a lot easier than being the expert, right? And that's what people don't understand.
It reminds me of the saying that, science advances one funeral at a time.
One coffin at a time, one funeral at a time. Yeah.
Another way of saying that.
Yeah. Well, because it has to, because just that's what distributed cognition does. And science is a form of the problem. I got to do a video on this. Maybe I'll do it tonight if I have energy. Science is just intersubjective validation, right? That's all it is. And once you realize that, it's like, so it's supposed to give you an independent frame so that you can validate the work of somebody else. And when it doesn't include the frame, you can't reproduce the experiment. That's the replication crisis, right? And there might be another replication crisis, but that's a mess to get into. So what happens is all you're talking about is intersubjectivity, right? In other words, if I do this set of things and somebody else does this set of things, the results are the same. That's intersubjective truth. That's what it is. And that's one way to think about the world, but it's not a good way to think about the whole world. And I don't know about this I heard about this Brett Weinstein conversation, the one that PVK referenced. How is it brutal? That would be my question here. Did you see this conversation with Robert Wright?
No, who's Robert Wright? Maybe I have, and I just don't know his name.
His name is like his channel's Non-Zero or something. He has a book about non-zero. He talked to Vervaeke. I saw that combo. That was an interesting conversation. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like any of these guys like Hoffman and Joshua Bach and all these crazy. They say crazy things on Twitter. It's like, well, you guys are like nuts. You're just crazy people. What is wrong with you? They stray their science into philosophy and pretend like it's new. And I'm like, yeah, that's literally a philosophical question that's thousands of years old, and you guys are treating it like some new revelation for science to tackle.
Man, that's like communism always changes its language, but it's still the same thing over and over again. It's watching repeat of history in so many ways. And then the is ought. Let me guess, you're talking about the is ought question, just in the relanguaged.
Yeah, right. A lot of this stuff boils down to is ought relanguage, right? Where they don't want to acknowledge that, reality has two aspects: an ethereal aspect and a physical or material aspect. And if you don't understand that we create reality by merging those two things, right? So what was moving the Wall Street folks? It was just their desire to cooperate. So they didn't manifest the wokeism. The wokeism got manifested because they were just throwing money at a problem they didn't understand. And so the spirit that was in the crowd, and there wasn't one spirit, right? So there's this tension in the crowd between, well, we all want something, but we want different things. And if you listen to Tim Pool, especially his older stuff, when I used to listen to, I don't listen to him anymore, you hear his stories. And he's like, well, this group wanted this, and that group wanted that, and this group was trying to do this, and this group was trying to do that. And then when you think about, well, what would that have developed into if you threw money at it? You get wokeism. Like, actually, I think it's right. The data was there at the time. Now, I wasn't privy to that data at that time, but that's basically what ended up happening. So it's not surprising to me that the spirits that were moving people, once they were fed attention, money, they manifested in a strange way. But I don't think that was planned. I don't think anybody saw it. But there is a point to say the Wall Street people were just throwing money at this problem so that these people would stop rioting. Oh, I agree. That definitely happened. But they didn't know what was going to happen as a result. And then the companies are just going along because, again, they don't want the riots back because it's bad for business. Fair enough. It's bad for society. Like, yes, we should give rioters, we should have a way to stop rioting. And if you're not willing to do it the Churchill way by shooting them, which he's unfairly maligned for occasionally, then money's the way to do it. But money doesn't solve all problems. And we should have learned that. Richard Nixon tried that trick. COVID policy in the military. I see.
What's that? No, COVID's destroying the military.
Yeah.
So many people have gotten out specifically for the reasons of their total abandonment of the Nuremberg Code of Human Rights.
But is Brett right and someone is purposely weakening the U.S. military readiness? No, I think, again, that's a result of a spirit. Like, this is what these people, because they're, look, if you're a materialist, you also have to be a conspiracy theory person. You have to be.
Oh, well, okay. I want to push back on that. I think part of the problem here is your reference point is very much centered around the water you swim in, and that we tend not to think in long term where other people do. So what I see here is I see that in other societies, they don't think within power structures that have to shift within their lifetime. But I see that societies sometimes have goals that people work towards, and those things that are happening are part of a long spear that's existed for 150, 200 years. The Chinese don't think about gaining power instantly like, a Wall Street person will think about their quarter balance or their quarterly profits. They think about, how can I advance this ball forward as getting to a goal that may exist after that person's died. So I don't really believe that these things randomly happen. I think that they are all part of a general push that keeps on culminating into something like that. And I don't necessarily think that it was meticulously planned, but I think that there is a general direction planned, and it tends to all gather enough steam and focus enough to make it much more salient as we're seeing now. Is this making sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, that could be. I'm not going to discount what you're saying because I can't prove or disprove it, right? But what I'm saying is, it's possible that there are principalities, right, and that those principalities are somewhat fungible, right? Because I don't subscribe to, we'll say, the PVK and Jonathan Peugeot idea. As far as I understand it, I don't understand it very well, right?
Well, a good example of this is the long march through institutions that was basically coined by Antonio Gramsci, which is like Communism 3.0, where he said that, you know, the proper way to bring about, you know, the utopia on earth is not that you're going to bring it through the working class and they're going to have a revolution. It's that you need to infiltrate something, take it over, and start at the bottom, and maybe eventually your children will live in that system. You won't, but you have to look at it like you're bringing a form of religion to the future and the dialectical faith.
No, but again, I think the principality of the ideas that drive the communist desire
Why do you say the word principality?
Well, because I think they're. Well, yeah.
Are you
mean
principle as in like morally right or wrong, or
no, not principle. No. Principalities are these conception, like I said, this is the Jonathan Peugeot conception, right? That the principalities are things moving the world. And I actually don't believe that. I think it's just spirit. So the spirit of the desire for control over things, for example. So we can cast that, we'll say, around World War II, right? What happened around World War II, right? Because the evil dictator guy did not, in fact, build the thing that created the war machine. That was already there, right? He got voted into office. He didn't create that structure. That structure was already there. That centralized structure was already in place for him to take over. That's actually really important, right? The ethos that he was using to take over were the two great sciences of the day, ironically enough. And actually, Vervaeke mentioned this in a talk once, which I was glad he did.
Are you referring to progressivism in its Nazi form?
No. Progressivism is a core problem. How it manifests is different. So the way progressivism manifested back then, because Hitler was a progressive, that is true. Look that up. He was a leftist progressive.
Just one who believed in genetics.
Most Europeans know this. Well, look, there were two great sciences of the day. Socialism. What is socialism? Socialism is the science of government. Guess one thing you can't science: government, right? What's the other thing that you can't science that was a great science of the day? Evolution. So this, eugenics is a scientifically correct, accurate, precise, and totally valid way of understanding the world. But it's unethical, right? So I don't disagree with eugenics on scientific grounds at all. Because science doesn't imply it doesn't have an ethics. It doesn't have ethics and morality does not exist within the realm of science. This is part of the problem that these people have, right? But I do object to it on moral grounds. And if you listen to Brett Weinstein very carefully, he's actually down that road, right? He stated it many times, at least 3 that I know of, that we need to override evolution. Well, overriding evolution, buddy, it sounds a lot like eugenics. I mean, that eugenics, maybe you could argue eugenics is one form of overriding evolution. But I think all forms of overriding evolution are going to lead to eugenics, irrespective of whether or not you think there are other forms. That would be my argument. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so. Like, I have a strong hunch on this that when you try to science something like evolution, which is a natural process in the world that's being driven by something that we do not understand and cannot.
Well, you're basically adding the is-ought into it.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, evolution is an attempt to jump the is-ought gap. right? And that's why I say, look, I'll give Vervaeke, there's no telos in evolution, I don't care. But evolution doesn't define creation, right? If your definition of evolution does define creation, then there's definitely a telos in evolution. But if your evolution is just a process and it's embedded within creation, which I think is a better definition, then you can have no telos in evolution all day long. I don't care. But the telos is in the creation.
Okay.
But
Sorry if I
when
got you
you
on a sidetrack.
ignore the telos, yeah, but when you ignore the telos, what you get is a spirit. And how that spirit manifests is different from, we'll say, where that spirit may or may not be, right? And so, and again, they're fungible to some extent, these spirits or these principalities. And so if you just throw money at a group of people to shut them up and get them to stop rioting, you get wokeism. Of course you do, right? Now, if you throw money at a different group of people who are rioting, you may get different things, but I would argue it would look a lot like wokeism. Like there wouldn't be that much different.
Yeah, but is the thing that I circle back to is I don't think that's by accident. I think people with a long enough historical understanding of human psyche would see that as a natural outcome and prod that.
I don't think they will. I think it comes from ignorance. I think it comes from literal ignorance and the belief that things.
I don't think it's ignorance. that's the differentiation here. Is I see people do things that they know are like, watching what the CIA does on certain things, and I'm sure they fail all the time, but there's so much that they don't fail at that you don't even realize exists.
I don't know. I mean, I've talked to people about this. They say almost everything they do fails all the time, and it's so rare that they get the outcome that they want. But the reason why they keep doing it is because doing nothing is worse. And that's literally the only reason. And that's true of a lot of businesses. Like I saw this all the time when consulting, like all the time. People would be like, we can't do nothing. And I'd be like, you do know the following 4 things are going to happen. And they'd say, no, that's not true. And I'm like, actually, it has to be true. It's mathematically certain. And they'd just ignore me and those 4 things would happen.
And then they'd call you 6 months later.
Right. But that's the thing. Like people really are ignorant. Like you have no idea. In business, you would be utterly shocked at how stupid and ignorant people are, especially not in lower level management, because I did a lot of consulting in the C-suite. The upper level managers are morons. Like they're literal morons. They really don't understand how things work. And that's okay. Like competence is not common and they're just not up there. Right.
Yeah. But my question is that a predictable tool to be wielded?
No, it's not. I think that's the problem is we see patterns. So we see these chaotic results. And then we go, there must be a pattern. That's why I said like homelessness and riots. They're clearly reasonable ways to think about the world. But if you think about them as coherent things and not as responses to incoherent things, you misapprehend what's happening.
I don't
because
know.
A riot,
homelessness and riots is logical. So that's why I don't have a.
Right. A riot doesn't have a single telos. And so it's a different type of a thing. Homelessness doesn't have a single telos because it's a single result, but it's not a single cause. This is why final cause is important.
Okay, yeah, I can get you there. I guess I don't live within the idea that anything has a single cause. I live within like there's averages and there's exceptions.
Well, but okay, but here let me try this. My objection to the idea of Neoplatonism is that it doesn't seem to refer to a coherent thing, right? It just seems to refer to the thing that all Neoplatonists seem to have in common is Plato and Aristotle, and they don't seem to have anything else in common. So are they really new Platonists or are they just Platonists? Right? And I'm not saying like, because I can identify Platonists, but I can't identify all the people that have Plato and other things in common. And this is the problem Vervaeke runs into, right? He starts looking at the world and going, well, that's very Neoplatonic. Well, that's very Neoplatonic. That's very Neoplatonic. And it's all Neoplatonic, John. Do you know why? Because we came after Plato and Aristotle, and almost everybody assumes that they're correct. So at that point, what designation does Neoplatonic have if it's ubiquitous, because it seems to be ubiquitous. And I would argue it's not a useful way to think about the world.
I guess one way of viewing that is they were just describing a function that's existed since thought began. So it's going to exist after that point anyways. It just was coined.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the problem that I have, is that a lot of this stuff is we keep rediscovering things and renaming them for no reason, right? And then you can look at other things like that, and you can say there's a difference between when you're identifying a whole as something that has, we'll say, a telos, right? And a difference when you're identifying a state that happens when you fall into chaos. So I would identify homelessness or riots or any mob action as a state that happens when you fall into chaos. And so it's not invalid to label it, but it's not a label of the same type as a whole that has a consistency. So, and this goes back to the thing I wanted to say initially when you got on, which is the thing you're on about to some extent when you talk about there's cells in the body, but that's not the body, right? Is that concept that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So when the whole is greater than the sum of the parts and you name it, that name is a different type of name than a name for something like a riot that is not a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. It's not a whole at all, but it is a bunch of parts that are acting in a chaotic way towards disparate ends, basically. And that actually is really interesting to think about and engage with.
I guess I'm trying to figure out the application of it in my head.
Well, the application would be that, again, when you see something, that doesn't mean that it had an intent behind it, that it had a telos, right? So this gets you out of conspiratorial thinking, right? This makes you not Grim Grizz. So you're not constantly saying, oh, the world is rational and people meant to do that. Rational and competent, right? The world is not rational and competent. It's neither. And there are elements that are rational and competent, but they generally follow a telos, right? So in order to be rational and competent, you have to follow a telos.
Okay, here's the problem I have with that is I believe that both are true. I believe that there is, forces that are guiding things towards their own end. And I also believe that there's randomness because of reality. So like I can't, the thing I always have a hard time with is people who reject the idea that there's conspiracies. I just look at all of human history and like all of human history is humans conspiring for more power or resources. There's no break in that continuum.
No, that's actually not true at all. Like that's definitely not true.
Humans have always worked for and against each other for resources. There's no.
The Crusades weren't a war for resources at all. Actually, I mean, this is one of the great counterexamples.
No, I have a really great. I have a totally different view of the Crusades than most people do.
Yeah, but the Crusades were not a war over resources at all, even a little bit. They weren't, and it wasn't about religion
UN
either.
peacekeeping mission of their time.
No, it wasn't either. No, it wasn't. It wasn't any of those things. That's the interesting part. Do you know why the Crusades happened? Do you understand the socioeconomic forces that caused the Crusades under King Philip?
Well, okay, so I understand that basically there was a whole bunch of problems, and he gave the people a focus, and he said, "Go over there and do that," because that took the pressure off of him.
Right. He was trying to keep the country united. Right. So he's got all these warring people in the South who are basically they're fighting amongst each other, but if one of them consolidated power, then they were going to move north and take over France, and the north of France is a bunch of stuck-up pricks, and they didn't want to be taken over, even though that would have been better for the world. Little did we know back then. And so basically, he conspires with the Pope and basically says, look, the problem is that Christians aren't allowed into Jerusalem, which was a lie, and therefore we need to free the Holy Land, right? And he used his money, power, and influence, along with the money, power, and influence of Rome, to give them a financial incentive to go on a crazy quest, right? And one of the first things they did, I might have this wrong, but I think actually I'm right about this. One of the first things they did was they got into roughly that Israeli area, and the first city they conquered was a Christian-run city. It wasn't even run by the Muslims, right?
Nazarene or
And
something
so,
like that.
right, it wasn't a religious thing. That's wrong. It was an attempt to get rid of some quarrelsome nobles out of the south of France so that he didn't lose power. And so it had nothing to do with with resources. It had more to do with and look, and Rome agreed, right? The Pope agreed. Well, we need to keep France a country, and maybe they did. Although, like I lay all the problems of modernity from that point forward on the country of France specifically. So I have my bias, and I am French.
French philosophers have created nothing but pure hell, and same with the Germans.
Yes, exactly. So
And
yeah,
they were all both competing on who could be worse.
right. So the war wasn't for the resources, right? You could argue that the war was to preserve the resources of France.
Yeah, but the
That's
resource
kind of
here
the thing.
is not material. It's it's more about control of power structures, and it doesn't that not necessarily that they're trying to get food
Yeah,
or
I
they're
don't.
trying to get land. It's more that they're
How are you?
trying to wield
Well,
the
no,
power structures, which is in and of
Yeah.
itself a
What is a
resource.
power structure, and how does it work? See, this is where the problem comes in with the postmodern version of power. I don't even know what a power structure is or how it would work.
Okay, well, one, I don't necessarily reject everything that postmodernism says. I just reject their application of where they stop that. So
Fair enough.
what I mean by this, going back towards that aspect, is one of the problems that we have in the West is we tend to look at through the lens of the Roman Catholic Church. We don't look at it at the wider aspect of it is how did like the Eastern Orthodox view this whole thing? To them, there wasn't really crusades. There was just these idiots coming from Western Europe, coming and fucking up their world. Whereas the
Right.
Eastern Orthodox,
Right.
they had been the wall keeping Islam from taking over, the Romans, where the Romans were just like fucking idiots. And
Right.
going back to the other thing, the Byzantines considered themselves Roman. There was this great big giant dichotic fight within the Christian world that made them weak, that allowed Islam to flood in. Because
Right.
the Roman Catholic Church refused to acknowledge the Eastern Orthodox, and the Eastern Orthodox were basically like, we're the real Romans, and you're just like power-hungry authoritarians over there. And it's I don't view the Crusades like we view it through the Western lens. I view it more as just one big giant clusterfuck of a UN peacekeeping mission of its era, trying to keep idiots out of Europe from deposing the power structures that exist there, and coming into the Middle East, which if they had done that 300 years before, Islam would have never taken root or hold like it did. All Islam did was it came swept into an area of Christianity that was completely kicked out by the Roman Catholic Church during the
Right.
Nicene Creed schism, where they kicked out anybody who didn't believe that Jesus was God, like Trinitarians versus non-Trinitarians, and non-Trinitarians basically got subjugated by the Islamists.
Right.
So the what we explain as that area, I just totally don't jive with it, because it's so much more. Like I think we have absolutely no guilt when you look at the fact that they were basically there in a way to stop a 500-year pattern of genocide that had been happening anyways. And they were shitbags too, but the idea that it was a peaceful, loving area that everybody was tolerated, oh my God, I'm so sick of that lie.
Oh yeah,
So
no,
sick.
that's for sure. There were problems. I mean, and the funny part is, had they not invaded, Islam probably would have fallen apart on its own accord anyway, right?
Yeah, it
Because they
gave them
were
the
already-
ability to rally around, and Islam defines itself on fighting the subjugation of the world to Islam. And if you give it something to push back on them, then it further defines itself.
Well, and justification. See, Islam needs justification to get new troops.
Yes.
Right, new converts. Right, and so when there's no like if you don't push against them, they kind of fall apart. Which is the story of the Middle East recently, right? From let's say from before World War I on, right? Like they only flare up when we go in there and mess them up again. And if we just stop doing that, they will just kind of fade. Like that's what seems to happen historically anyway. The past 150 or so years shows that pretty clearly.
for sure. Yeah, when I started reading into the alternative history of like the Crusades, I stopped believing the lie that we had any form of guilt for it. And I'm just like, you know what? The amount of genocide and death that was happening 500 years before that, and I know like everybody thinks of as the Spanish Inquisition was this horrible thing. I'm just like, no, actually, the Spanish Inquisition was actually something that was about 400 years long, and just only that we feel guilt for the resolution of it. But before that point, they were all just slaughtering each other in a constant bloody battle that never ceased for 350 years as
Right.
they were trying to push up through there. And if anything, the Spanish Inquisition was just like, you know, the Poles did to the Germans after World War II, where they're like, just get out. And they went and basically killed or purged everybody who was taking part in the Nazi persecutions. That's pretty much
Right.
the same thing that happened in the Spanish Inquisition, is the people who were brutalized for 400 years had like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was pretty brutal. And they were like, well, you did all this stuff to us, and either you go with us this way, or you get out, or we kill you now. And not that it's right or wrong, but I view it as like an abusive relationship resolving itself, you know?
Right. Well, and they weren't doing the killing, right? They were advising the governments, right, and saying we're here to establish order, right? Because that's what they were there to do. And some of the governments took it a little hard, and some of them, you know, were a lot lighter with it. And there are plenty of accounts. I know this has been coming out recently. There are plenty of accounts of people who wanted to plead to blasphemy because the Spanish Inquisition gave them a better deal than the government would have for their stealing or whatever else they were doing. And so, right. And so it's kind of like, well, the people back then really liked the Spanish Inquisition in some cases because they knew they'd get a better deal from the church than they were going to get from the government, because the church was the one telling the government or advising the government, but it was the government that was doing the bad things, not the church.
Oh yeah. Well, the only reason that the American Indians were spared anything is the Christians of that era realized that they couldn't work them, you know, like they could anybody else, and they were just killing them. So that it was the church that actually stopped them from being even worse than they were.
Right. Well, and the problem with all that mess is that, well, yes, the Catholics from Spain did very bad things to the Native Americans.
Oh yeah, well, everybody did bad things to everybody else in all of human history. There's no difference there. We only just post hoc look at it in a silent way.
Except that in the East, the Puritans did nothing but good things for the Indians the whole time, and it was the French that started the first. If you've never looked up King Philip's War, the first American Indian War, it's the most deadly war by per capita in U.S. history, and nobody knows.
Yeah, it lasted like 40 years or something like that.
Right, but if you look that up, you get a very different picture of what's going on. And then once you realize that it was the Indians that broke all the treaties first, because that happened, then the whole rest of the history of Indians in North America changes. And you also have to realize that the Puritans were welcome to Plymouth Plantation precisely because the Indians had been wiped out already. Like they had already lost most of their population through disease. That didn't happen as a result of colonization. It happened as a result.
No, that just happened from introduction of.
And an introduction prior, most likely an introduction prior to Columbus, which people don't understand. But actually, there's a lot of evidence that Columbus went to Scotland and found out from the Scottish sailors who were hiding the fact that they were trading with North America that there was, in fact, a North America to trade with. And there's a lot of evidence that it was actually right after that visit that he ran down and got his money for his boats.
Yeah, there's also evidence that the Moors had been coming there too, because if you look at the trade routes and you could just basically throw a boat floating in the ocean and it'll hit America, you know, depending on the cycles of the water.
There's lots of possibilities that trade was going on between the continents a lot longer than people realized, and it was only you know, I mean, you can go back to the Vikings if you want. There's actually Viking monuments in Massachusetts. Why, I don't know. Whether or not they're valid, I have no idea. But there are wealthy people in Massachusetts who have built monuments claiming the Vikings were in like different parts of Massachusetts, Eastern Mass. It's very funny. It's very funny to me.
Yeah.
So,
So how much do you know
that
about
story of
the?
history is different, right? That whole cast of history is a little bit different, and that's where the postmoderns get it wrong, because they'd say, well, our version of history as how
the only
top-down
version
power
that's-
from above is the only version.
Oh, yeah, that's the funny thing with the postmodern people. I'm like, okay, if nothing has meaning and you're assigning the meaning, then I'm basically going to assign that anything that you say is completely full of shit too. And they can't process that part of it. It's like they can't step out of the fact that what they're saying is also bullshit too.
Right. Well, because they, I mean, in some sense, look, they're idiots. They actually, it really, like, and I have a video on this on navigating patterns, right, on postmodernism. Foucault is basically a 3-year-old. That's really all he is, right? Because any 3-year-old
sexual fetish problems.
Well, because all I have to do is ask you why until you don't have an answer. And now suddenly in the postmodern frame, I'm smarter than you because I found out something you don't know, which makes no sense to me, but that is the way we're treating it. Like, I found something you don't know, and therefore I'm smart, and I'm smarter than you. I was like, that's not what that means, kid. Like, that's just not how the world is, but whatever, right? But also, the postmoderns, because they deny frames as a valid way of thinking about the world, and of course you can't do anything without frames, they don't see their own error because they're just denying. It's like denying religion. I deny that I'm a religious creature, and then the next thing you know, you're in BLM washing feet or whatever, right? Like, so funny.
Yeah, when I was watching that, I was just like, wow, this is how it was created 2,000 years ago. Just
right.
What's the story going to look like 2,000 years from now?
Right. Well, and I think there are patterns, and they reemerge because they're perennial patterns or something. They're real patterns in the world, right? And that's what religion is coming to terms with those patterns that aren't material. And materialists can't think about that because there are no tools for that. And I think that when you rely on logic, reason, and rationality, and especially yourself and only yourself, you deny distributed cognition, you're not going to understand most of the world because most of the world is faith, love, and hope. And that's the primary mode of the world because that drives everything. It's the spirit that drives everything, not the material. That's why when you build Twitter, it turns into a dumpster fire until Elon Musk comes along, quite literally, injects hope, because that's what he did. And then all of a sudden, Twitter's awesome. Like, Twitter right now is awesome. There was a day, I think it was last week, I was thinking a week ago or something. Best day I've seen on Twitter. I'm like, oh, it's fabulous. This is fantastic. This is lovely. And yeah, I mean, I think the materialists, ultimately they can't deny spirit, right? But they come up with egregore, or they reinvent something, or they blame politics, or they blame economics, or they blame the platform, or they blame the algorithm. Do any of these sound familiar? Right, for why things are happening. And I try to explain to people, look, I've got quite a few years in computers. Okay, algorithms don't work the way people are telling you they do. If you go on Twitter, if everybody on Twitter posts smiley faces, the Twitter algorithm will only post smiley faces. I promise you. With very few exceptions, you can make it do other things, but
well, you can make the algorithm
hate
data. Certain code words of one team.
Right, but algorithms require data. In other words, any algorithm, no matter how smartly written or whatever, and I've written algorithms. It's not that
the algorithm takes the form of a creator.
They only work on the data they're given. And so if there's a dumpster fire in Twitter, it's because people are putting it there, not because the algorithm is creating it out of whole cloth. And that's why when Elon Musk comes in, it changes. It changes because the spirit drives it. And he injected a new spirit. It's that simple.
It's interesting. My rabbi actually joined. I grew up Christian. I've been going to a rabbi recently because I found him fascinating. But he went and basically waded into Twitter because he saw that form of hope that you're talking about. It was like, okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. I mean, I was there posting pictures of flowers and talking about ineffable beauty and posting the occasional link to one of my videos, not all of them or anything, but that was my way of making Twitter a better place, and it worked, and my feed was awesome anyway. But when Elon Musk came in, man, wow, my feed blew up, and everything was awesome. It was fun and funny and positive, and even when they were talking about political type stuff in a political frame, it was very positive. And I was like, this is great. This is a wonderful environment. So yeah.
I guess I have a hard time with that because I'm also can be a shit poster. Like
Yeah.
the dichotomy exists where I can have a good reasoned conversation, and the idea of is everything's absurd, so fucking ride the absurdity.
Yeah, well, that's reasonable. But to some extent, in order to have a good time, you have to have certain skills, and those are the same skills you have to be a shit poster. So it's fine. It's fair,
And the jester is the zeitgeist of the era.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, if you're pushing back against evil, you're still a shit poster to some extent. And I like Joey does that all the time on Twitter. Freaking Joey, so funny to follow Joey on Twitter because
Are you talking like Joey Salads or Joey?
No, Joey Antonucci. He's the guy who did BOM. He started BOM. He's on Twitter just posting the funniest things. And just he's just using their logic against them and stuff. Like he's using their rationality against them.
I don't know this. Wait, he started what again?
He started the Bridges of Meaning Discord server.
Bridges of Meaning. Sorry, I heard BLM. I was like
BOM. Yeah, sorry. No, not BLM. BOM.
BOM. That makes sense.
Yeah. Bridges of Meaning. Yeah, sorry, I'm using shortcuts because my brain is.
No, it's okay. I know I'm on the Discord there. I just haven't really popped onto Discord too much lately. Not enough that people recognize me on there.
It's not for everyone, that's for sure.
Well, I remember going in there, waiting in once, trying to talk about Aryan Christianity, not white power, but Aryanism, the older forms of non-Trinitarian Christianity. I always find the bridge sections where Christianity and Judaism break off is fascinating inflection points.
Mm-hmm.
Because Aryanism was actually where the Spanish were, and when Islam swept into it, it just came into an area that had been rejected by the Catholic Church. So they were not part of the Christian whole at that point in time. So they're very easily swayed by another guy who said that, I don't believe that Jesus is a God either. Here, follow my cult of personality.
Yeah, we're not Trinitarians either. You should follow us. Yeah.
It's exactly how he gained power. Is he came into a world that had been rejected from the schism of Trinitarian Christianity, trying to become the ultimate Christianity. And he didn't have to really fight them. He just had to walk in and say, I won't persecute you like those people will. And eventually he did persecute them once he had the upper hand.
I have a similar worldview to yours, but you should adopt mine because postmodernism. Yeah.
Yeah. In a way, it was that thing back then. It was he basically, within the religion, is the idea that you are quiet and you reason when you don't have the power, and that when you do have the power, you use the power. It's in a religious form there, and it became postmodernism later too. It's the Mecca versus Medina period of Islam.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem is that people don't realize. This is one of my other complaints in my video, right? Foucault and Derrida didn't discover anything new or interesting or important. Like they just didn't do original work. It's just not all that interesting at the end of the day. And it's poison. It's absolute poison that they're talking about. They're basically 3 years old. If you just ask why long enough, you'll be the smartest postmodernism that ever lived. Unfortunately, you'll still be 3 years old. But that's the problem, is that it's just not a very intellectually rich and deep point. It's really not what it claims to be or what people make it out to be. It's very shallow and sad, and it's self-referential and it's parasitic, and there's just no good can come from postmodernism. And it's just shocking that people don't realize that.
I find it fascinating that it tends to gravitate, people with predilections for what's the proper term that YouTube won't get pissed at? Sexual deviance of all sorts. Like it's using higher level language in order to hide a moral failing, I guess.
But it's deviance in general.
Logically reason it.
Well, because deviance is just you're not following the normal pattern or societal pattern or the frame, right? And so in order to do that, you need to get rid of the frame, and then you're no longer a deviant. Yeah, fair enough. Yep. That's true, right? But that's also Rousseau, by the way. Like really Foucault just restated Rousseau, who was wrong.
Right, and,
Like
and
it's
then
not
later
hard.
on it became the queer theory movement.
Right. Well, because they're just restating the same thing. They're like, oh, look, if all frames are valid, then my frame's okay, and therefore I'm not a deviant because I'll find a frame where my behavior is normalized. And then it's just your oppressive frame against my non-oppressive frame, and therefore I'm better because mine's not oppressive. It's like, what? But then you don't have a frame.
Not following my
Because,
frame.
right, but then you don't have a frame because you're not oppressive. Like, and it all falls apart. And that's basically what Peterson pointed out about critical race theory in this. Eventually, they just eat themselves.
I guess the problem I've had with Peterson on that is he's been so focused on critical race theory that there's so much more there that's people don't like. I love James Lindsay's work right now. He's just so much beyond Peterson. Like Peterson's become a broken record to me lately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I understand that. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's important to realize the poison of postmodernism and how intellectually bankrupt it actually is. And then once you realize this isn't smart people and they're not being smart and they're not telling you anything useful, they're not giving you information that a 3-year-old doesn't already have, or skills that a 3-year-old doesn't already have, and their promise is a lie. And then it's like, well, but they do lead to chaos and parasitic behavior, and maybe that's bad.
Well, I appreciate the talk, but I think the wife is calling me.
Uh-oh. Well, it was a pleasure, sir. I hope to talk to you again soon, and I'm going to end the stream, and have a great evening.
You too. Bye.